evening, folks. If I can call this meeting to order. We have a few agendas we're going to be following this evening. For your information, we will be beginning with a special meeting of council, followed by a second special meeting of council, and that will be followed by our committee agenda, and that will be followed by our council agenda. So with that, I'm going to ask Councillor B. Kenny to start us off with a prayer, followed by Mr. Joe Longfellow with the national anthem. Councillor Kenny.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for thy blessings. Almighty God, you have given us the good land as our heritage. May we prove ourselves as people mindful of your generosity and glad to do your will. Enrich our citizens with your heavenly grace and prosper them with happiness. Help this council and staff make wise decisions for the benefit of all the citizens. This we ask in your precious name. Amen.
In all thy Son's command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Joe. Well done as always.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My pleasure as always.
Members of council, I'll need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Doucette. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. We'll now move on to disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures this evening? With none, we'll move on to the public hearing under the Planning Act. We have the adoption of a community improvement plan under Section 28.
Your Worship, sorry.
Councillor Kenny, go ahead.
Sorry, Your Worship, I should declare a conflict with item 3 as I am a member of the Committee of Adjustment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As I was stating, the public hearing under the Planning Act, adoption of a community improvement plan under Section 28, Department of Planning and Development Services, report number 2011-85, the subject, public meeting, East Waterfront Community Improvement Plan, and proposed secondary plan. Members of Council, it is outlined in your agenda this evening. Mr. Aquilina, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. And good evening to you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and those in attendance this evening. As mentioned by you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of this meeting is held pursuant to Sections 17 and 28 of the Planning Act. It is to consider the proposed East Waterfront Community Improvement Plan and draft secondary plan. This method of the meeting tonight, Mr. Mayor, was held pursuant to Sections 17 and 28 of the Planning Act and Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 543/06. Notice was placed in the import on November the 4th, and the notice was also placed on the city's website. The explanation to be followed this evening, Mr. Mayor, is tonight we have Tim Smith with Urban Strategies and Luch Piccioni of RCI Consulting that will present the Community Improvement Plan. We will then open up the floor to those members of council that wish to add any comments or questions to either myself or the consultants this evening. We will then open up the floor to those members of the public that wish to address council. I will then give an announcement respecting written notice of the proposed community improvement plan and secondary plan and an explanation of future meetings to be considered on this application. This time, Mr. Mayor, as many members of council are aware, this began in 2003. Urban Strategies was retained by the city. Work got underway, and a lot of work was undertaken by the consultants and the members of the public and council and staff of the day. Unfortunately, what we believe were going to be lands available for redevelopment opportunities weren't so. The project was put on hold. We now believe we're in a position with Transport Canada and the St. Lawrence Seaway to actually come to an agreement or an arrangement for potential redevelopment opportunities. And so the project was kick-started. It began earlier this year. Urban Strategies then came on board once again, and members of the public were involved. And at this time, I would like to call upon Tim Smith with Urban Strategies and Luch Piccioni with RCI Consulting, and they can present and the community improvement plan for council's consideration. And Tim will probably go on and give some background as to why we're here as well. Members.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Mr. Smith, welcome.
Thank you.
And Mr. Piccioni, welcome. Once again, becoming a fixture here.
Thank you very much, Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here to give you an overview of the East Waterfront, the draft East Waterfront Community Improvement Plan, CIP for short, and the draft secondary plan. These really go hand in hand, these two documents. Really need the secondary plan to implement some land use changes so we can fully implement the CIP. I'm going to take about 10 or 12 minutes, I think, to give you an overview of a big chunk of the CIP and then hand it over to Luch to talk specifically about the all-important incentive programs. Let's see if I can work out the technology here. There we go. Dan's already given you a kind of a setup to my presentation, talking to this slide. We did actually start looking at your waterfront, studying it back in 2003, 2004. And as Dan mentioned, a bit derailed when the notions for the East Waterfront. The East Waterfront was always a focus of our work when the Seaway kind of threw a bit of a wrench in the works. But we've sorted things out now and back into it early this year. We dove right into a kind of community revisioning process, had a workshop with members of the community. And then that gave us a good grounding to proceed with some initial vision and sort of directions for the CIP. We brought those back to the community in June and July of this year for some feedback. And then Luch actually had a workshop in September to talk specifically about the incentive programs and which ones would be most effective. So all that kind of community input has provided the basis for the draft CIP we have before you this evening. Now, I don't need to spend a lot of time describing the East Village and the East Waterfront, larger East Waterfront area. I think you all know it fairly well. It's actually an area that's not without its charms. As you can see in this first photograph of these three delightful houses near the East Village Park, there are some attractive qualities to the East Waterfront. However, there's a lot of unattractive qualities. There are vacant industrial sites. There are streetscapes that have seen better days, more vibrancy, more beauty, and a number of derelict buildings, vacant properties, as we've identified on this map. And of course, next to the neighborhood are just vast tracts of nothingness, really. Vacant, abandoned, long abandoned industrial lands that are really casting a blight on the neighborhood. So there's really no doubt in my mind, or certainly Luch's mind, that this is a prime candidate for a community improvement project area. And we have identified the boundaries of that area. Actually, I'll just go back so that's very clear to you what we're talking about. Oops. Maybe I won't go back. Yeah. Not going to be so easy. Okay. So the CIP boundary is essentially the neighborhood, and the tracts of land you see here. Here we go. That didn't work. There we go. Okay, so the CIP boundary is the blue outlined area there, stretching all the way down to the lake. And identified here in the white areas, these are essentially the vacant lands that really need to be reconsidered for new uses. And much of them, the hatched areas are privately owned lands, but the rest are owned by Transport Canada. So when we approach an area like this, we sort of ask ourselves, well, what can we do to improve this neighborhood? But then also, what can we do to improve its surroundings? And then in this case, what can we do to improve the connections from the neighborhood, primarily down to the lake? The greatest asset for the East Waterfront is Nickel Beach, is the waterfront. And so how can we reconnect that neighborhood back to the lake? The answer really comes in the form of 9 community goals. I won't read all of these, but not surprisingly, the number 1 is to kind of go back into that neighborhood, fix it up, repair the homes. And of course, there are some significant buildings in the neighborhood, architecturally, historically significant buildings. Make sure we protect those, encourage their reuse. We want to improve those streetscapes, address the environmental and visual impacts of industries with better buffers. And actually start to attract over time new investment and new development. And as well, create some new open spaces, recreational amenities, make this a more attractive place to live, improve connections for pedestrians and cyclists down to the lake, and actually look at Nickel Beach as not just a beach, but put some more attractions there to make it more of a destination, more amenities for the community, and then recognize there are some important natural features on the lake, perhaps there should be more, so let's protect what's there and then enhance the natural qualities of the lake. So the long-term vision, if you had to sum it up in one word, it would be green. The idea here is to really turn around and make the waterfront and the community much, much greener. So a green edge along Welland Street as a green buffer to the community, between the community and the canal, to go back in and renovate and infill the neighborhood, to extend the neighborhood to south of Rodney Street with new development, create some truly green streets throughout the neighborhood, and on this, what we call the spit, extending out to the lake, create an environmental park, which I'll talk about in a moment. Nickel Beach, more amenities, and then a trail from Seaway Park down to the lake to connect it all together. So I'll show you a few images of the vision. So along Welland Street, on the west side of Welland Street, the notion is of a series of linked open spaces, a continuous green edge, which will have a winding trail through it, but as well as some neighborhood amenities, perhaps a small skateboard park, a splash pad, a community center, community gardens. The exact program would need to be worked out, but the idea is something that works for the community, but also is a bit of a regional destination as well. These images give you kind of an idea of the character of that space. And then further to the south, this notion of environmental park. I don't know if anyone here really is familiar with Toronto and the Brickwork project, which the Evergreen Foundation has really turned into it's taken an industrial kind of scar on the landscape and actually turned it back and given it to nature and given it to people, the people of the city. And that's the idea here, is to take this kind of what essentially was created largely through slag from the steel mill that was once there, actually put some soil back there, green it up, put some trails through it, a parking lot that could serve Nickel Beach, and eventually perhaps an educational destination, a cultural destination, maybe a marine recreation center. So really make it beautiful and give people a reason to get down there. And again, here are some images that would suggest what it could look and feel like in the fullness of time. The neighborhood itself, there's lots there to fix up, of course, but there are also sites to infill, to attract new development over time. That could take different forms. Certainly we want to encourage the kind of renovation. You're actually beginning to see the house on the left there is a current house that's seen some reinvestment. Maybe along Nickel Street you might see some mixed-use development, some live-work housing, some commercial uses on the ground floor, residential above, and of course we'd love to see some even new homes being built in the community. This notion of a neighborhood extension is the idea of taking those sites south of Rodney Street that are empty today and attracting some mid-rise residential development over time. Development that has a strong relationship to that new green edge we're trying to create, but also a strong relationship back to the neighborhood. And these images give you an idea of maybe the possible character of the housing down there. I've already talked about the green streets, and that's quite simply, in many cases, just planting trees, but also providing some pedestrian amenities like benches and plantings, things like that, special paving. Now that vision gives us the basis for a kind of new land use plan for the East Waterfront. In many respects, it isn't fundamentally different from the land use plan today. The neighborhood will stay a neighborhood. We do recognize that places like Nickel Street and Durham Street should have a mixed-use character, and then that newer neighborhood extension area would be at slightly higher densities. The big change is to take what were employment area industrial area along the west edge of Welland Street, south of Lake Road, and turn it to green space, to open space and park. Now, as per the Planning Act and the Places to Grow Act, it's not quite so straightforward as taking your map and coloring it green and changing your land uses like that. You actually have to go through a municipal comprehensive review of your employment lands to make sure that this is a wise decision, that you're not giving up important employment lands. So we've, at staff's request, done that, looked at your employment lands to make sure that these aren't critical to preserve for employment over the long term. There are 5 tests under the Planning Act to to be met for conversion from employment to non-employment uses. And they're up here on the bullet points here. The first one is there a need for the conversion? Well, I think the pressing need for improvement in the community suggests that there is a need for the conversion, and the fact that these lands have been vacant for decades. A very important question is, well, do you need these lands to meet your employment forecasts? And looking at the region's targets for your city, they're looking at requiring between 11 and 17 hectares of land over the next 20 years, depending on the density of development on those lands. And in fact, you have a supply of about 32 hectares, so probably about double what you really need. So you've got plenty of employment lands. It's no problem converting it from that standpoint. Will it affect the viability of the employment area? Well, I think the Seaway's willingness to give up those lands for other uses is recognition that we're not threatening the uses on their lands. And there is infrastructure to accommodate the conversion. And then further to the previous point, the lands are not required for industries related to the canal. And again, the Seaway and Transport Canada's recognition of this is proof. So that means we can go ahead, in our opinion anyway, and convert these lands to parks and open space and then proceed with implementing a public realm strategy. What we've identified is 10 major streetscape and open space projects within that strategy. Now, they will break down to probably smaller projects as you implement them. Some are big and some are not so big. But we've identified among those 10, three priority projects, three projects to try and get going, ideally in the next 2 to 5 years. The first one is not that complicated. It's taking Welland Street and making it more beautiful, fixing up the sidewalks and planting trees along both edges. The second project is to look at Nickel Beach, the entry to Nickel Beach, and provide some more amenities there. Pavilion building, restrooms, perhaps a short boardwalk, playground facilities, handicap parking, those kinds of things. And then number 3 is to begin working on those neighborhood streetscapes, going in and improving the pedestrian realm, planting more trees. I can go through the other projects later if you have questions about those. And again, as I mentioned, with the streetscape improvements, it really is simply a matter of taking what looks something like this in that lower left-hand diagram and widening sidewalks a little bit, narrowing the roadway a little bit, and adding trees. So to implement the public realm part of the plan, the first step is to go to get into a bit more detail in terms of the streetscape and open space elements, understand the costs for the various projects. Then you can proceed with inserting some of the projects into your capital plan. And then there have been site-specific risk assessments done by the federal government for the Seaway lands. You want to go back and those were done several years ago, make sure they're still up to date. But they do indicate that moving ahead with park uses is not necessarily going to be particularly expensive and problematic. Then moving ahead with land acquisition. It's not to say that you're going to acquire all this land, but to get the various players, the region, the Conservation Authority, perhaps the province, and of course the federal government, and start talking about who's going to take on these lands and move them forward. And then start to develop the partnerships you need, find funding from the upper levels of government, work with the region, and then bring in actually some corporate sponsorships who are these days quite eager to help with some projects like trails and other recreational facilities. So that's the public realm part of the implementation strategy. The other very important part, and what needs to go hand in hand with that public realm initiatives, are the incentives for private development. Because clearly, it's not all about making this place greener. It's also about fixing up homes. It's also about eventually attracting new development. So I'm going to turn it over to Luch, who's going to take you through those critical incentive programs.
Thank you, Tim. As Tim mentioned, this is a fulsome approach. So basically, we do need to, yes, take care of the public realm, improve the public realm, and send that signal to the private sector that the city is serious about the East Waterfront. But in addition, we do need to incentivize private sector development, just as you have done and are doing with your other community improvement plans. So when I was tasked to develop this toolkit of incentive programs for the East Waterfront, what we did was started by looking at the policy context, So the official plan, the existing conditions in the area. So what are the major weaknesses as far as the residential and other buildings and the underutilized properties? But we really focused in on the community goals and the vision that were developed through the consultation process. And in particular, looking at incentive programs that would help repair, restore, and revitalize the area, and also attract new investment and building to the area. We also looked at the incentive programs in both the other community improvement plans that the municipality already has in place, those being the old Humberstone CIP, the downtown CBD CIP, and the Brownfield CIP. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was consistent and also complementary. And then finally, as Tim mentioned, we held a workshop in September where we presented some preliminary incentive program concepts to the ward councilors, the area resident and business representatives, and senior city staff. And based on the input that they provided during that consultation session, we refined those incentive program concepts and ended up with the 6 complementary incentive programs that you see in the community improvement plan. Now, when we say it's a toolkit, what we mean is that it really say that from 2 perspectives. From the city's perspective, once the community improvement plan is adopted, council can activate or phase in those programs as it sees fit. So the community improvement plan is an enabling document. It allows and enables council to implement those programs one at a time, all of them, or none of them. Really, again, the implementation of those programs comes down to council's consideration of the budget, the available budget for those programs, just as it does with the public realm improvements. So in that regard, council has a toolkit that it can use. And we have gone so far as to provide prioritization to those particular incentive programs in terms of highest and then lower priorities, and that is contained in the community improvement plan. But it's also a toolkit for the applicant because depending on their circumstances, they may be able to use one or more of the programs if they're all available. And so they use it just like you would a toolkit. Whatever applies to their particular situation, they can go ahead and use that particular program. And we've provided safeguards within the community improvement plan to ensure that they're not double dipping or getting paid twice for the same eligible work. So I'm going to briefly take you through and summarize the incentive programs. And as Tim mentioned, if you have any questions about the programs, I'm happy to answer those. So the first program listed of the 6 is the Urban Design Study Grant. And here the city would offer a grant equal to 50% of the cost of any urban design studies or architectural drawings to a maximum grant of $1,750 per property or project. And this is to promote better urban design. Urban design is one of the weaknesses in this area. So we want to promote better studies, better drawings, that hopefully then that will translate into better quality construction and development. The second program is the Commercial Mixed-Use Building and Facade Improvement Grant and Loan Program. Now, I should mention that the region does contribute funding through the Smarter Niagara incentive programs to most of these programs, and the amount that they will contribute is listed there. I should also mention that all of the programs have a recommended duration of 10 years. So once the city puts a program in place, it should be made available ideally for 10 years. The only exception to that is the Planning and Building Fees Grant Program, where we've elected to have a 5-year availability and then a review at the end of the 5 years to see what it's accomplished, and then it can be extended for another 5 years. So the Commercial Mixed-Use Building and Facade Improvement Grant Loan really has 2 components. One is the facade component and one is the building improvement component. So for the facade improvement component, this deals strictly with the facade of the building. Really just things like painting, cleaning of materials, replacement of storefronts, doors, windows, awnings, canopies, that sort of thing. And the city would provide a grant equal to 50% of the cost of that improvement to a maximum grant of $10,000 per property or project. Now, that grant can be increased by up to $5,000 if the property is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, because of course those properties actually it does cost more to restore those facades. The second component deals with the building itself. So not just the facade, or not the facade, but the structure of the building, the roof, the windows, the doors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, electrical, plumbing. So it's really the guts of the building. And here we've put in place that the city can offer either a grant equal to 70% of the cost of those improvements to a maximum grant of $10,000 per property or project, or a loan equal to 70% of the cost of those improvements to a maximum loan of $20,000 per property or project. So obviously if it's a loan, it's repaid. The only costs to the city are the interest, and therefore the city can offer more under a loan basis than it can under a grant basis, because with the grant, once you give the money out, it's gone, it's not coming back. All right? Oh, and I should also mention that with the facade component, the other thing that we've done there is allow side and rear facades that are highly visible, for example, from major roadways or public parking lots or open spaces, to also be eligible for a separate grant of up to $5,000 per property or project. And this is something that we basically have seen in a few of the community improvement plans throughout Niagara. We did this in Grimsby. I think we've also done it most recently in Beamsville. So, you know, it just doesn't make sense to have beautiful front facades of buildings and then have a large parking area in the back, and the facades in the rear just aren't up to snuff. So we've adjusted for that. Now, the number one priority incentive program is something called the Residential Intensification and Rehabilitation Grant or Loan. And again, this has two components. The Residential Intensification Grant or loan, if it's a grant, it's $10 per square foot. If it's a loan, it's $15, up to a maximum of 4 units per property or project. That's designed to promote either the rehabilitation of existing residential units that, for example, aren't up to code in existing mixed-use buildings, or the construction of new residential units on vacant lots, for example. This would apply to the neighborhood infill and neighborhood extension areas. Now that differs from the residential rehabilitation grant. The grant is specifically focused on the existing neighborhood. So the single detached and multi-unit residential dwellings in the existing neighborhood, where the city would provide a grant equal to 50% of the cost of only exterior building maintenance and property improvements. And you can have up to 2 applications. So if someone wanted to phase the improvement of their residential dwelling, they could come in and get an application approved for one part this year, and then a year or 2 years down the road, they could still come back. And that is to try and address the affordability issue, whereas they might not have the money to do it all at once. The fourth program is an affordable housing grant or loan. Again, this is a grant equal to $10 per square foot of affordable residential space created, or a loan up to or $15 per square foot. And again, with the grant, it's a maximum of $10,000 per unit and a maximum of 4 units. With the loan, it's $15,000 per unit and a maximum of 4 units. Now, the region is currently reviewing its Smarter Niagara incentive programs. Recommendations have been submitted. I worked on that project. The report is done, and it is going. It is under budget consideration. And so if there is a program in there for an affordable housing grant or loan at the regional level. So if that's approved, the approach in the community improvement plan is that the city can, but does not have to, implement an affordable housing grant or loan program, and that the definition of affordable, be it the rental rate or the sale price of the unit, would correspond to the definition used by the region in their program. All right, so again, maximum flexibility. This doesn't commit the city to that program if the region has one, and in fact, if the region doesn't have one, the city doesn't have to do one, and likely shouldn't, frankly. But if the region has one, the city can elect to have their own program and then take advantage of the regional funding or not. Again, the priority of the program is listed in the community improvement plan. So finally, we turn to the revitalization tax increment grant, which is basically designed to compensate for any property tax increases that result from the improvement, be it of a single residential unit or a mixed-use building. And here the city would provide an annual grant equal to 80% of the city and region property tax increase that's generated by the project for up to 10 years after project completion. Again, the region matches the city in this program. And finally is the planning and building fees grant, and again this is very similar to the grant that's available in the downtown, the same type of planning and building fees grant, with a grant equal to 100% of the fees paid on planning and development applications, building permits, and sign permits. But again, we've capped that at $5,000 per project. So to conclude then, Now that we've described the public realm strategy, we've described the incentive programs, what's going to happen after this public meeting is that staff will prepare a recommendation report to council, and that recommendation report would include any revisions to the CIP as a result of comments received at this meeting, or as a result of this meeting, any comments from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and of course any questions that lead to comments or direction from council. That report would come back, and council would then consider that report, and at that time would consider adoption of the community improvement plan and direct staff to either prepare an adopting bylaw to adopt the community improvement plan as is with revisions, or council can elect not to adopt that community improvement plan. So once council passes that bylaw, then there's a 20-day appeal period, and if no individual or organization appeals that bylaw, after 20 days, the community improvement plan is then formally approved. And then, of course, council would consider implementation of both the public realm components and the incentive programs as part of the budget process. As I mentioned earlier, that can all be phased in, and only the public realm improvements and incentive programs that receive funding, as approved by council, would be implemented. So with that, that concludes our presentation. Again, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Piccioni. Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does any member of council have any questions either to myself or Mr. Smith or Mr. Piccioni?
Members of council. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one question. In regards to, we're talking about the planning and development grant and the intensification grant. Are these all grants that are going to be provided by the city to residences? Is this coming from a budget allotment that the city would have to put in every year for these different things, or are there other levels of government, I guess, that are going to be providing these grants?
Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can comment on the city's commitment. It will be subject to council's budget approval on a year-to-year basis. As Mr. Piccioni mentioned, there is potential regional monies available. I'm not sure if Mr. Piccioni wants to comment of any other upper levels of government that may fund. I'm not aware of any, but perhaps there are some.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the region does contribute to the commercial mixed-use building and facade improvement grant loan, the residential intensification and rehabilitation grantor loan, the affordable housing grantor loan, if they have one, of course, they would contribute, and the revitalization tax increment grant. The only incentive programs that the city would fund by itself are the planning and building fees grant and the urban design study grant, and you will note that those are the smallest amounts, and they are capped at a fairly low amount, and there's a reason for that.
Just to expand from that as well, Dan, I'm assuming that this is going to augment the Brownfields CIP as well as Luch. I'm surprised. I'm sure it's going to also augment the Economic Gateway CIP once that's in place. So there'll be further incentives that will attach itself to these particular lands.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. One would be able to take advantage, depending on what the proposal is, under the Brownfield CIP and potentially under the Gateway CIP. So depending on what's being proposed, there may be a whole suite of incentive programs available.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Getting back to the residential improvements and the intensification of the 4-unit limit per building, did I understand you correctly when you said you wouldn't implement that phase of the program unless the region had matching grants?
Gentlemen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the intention in the community improvement plan is that the affordable housing grant or loan wouldn't be implemented unless the region had a matching program. However, if the city wants to go ahead with its own program, it can certainly do that. However, because of the nature of that program and the costs that would be involved, it would be prudent to ensure that the region had a matching program. The residential intensification and rehabilitation grant loan is a separate program, and the region already has matching funds for that program available.
Councillor? That's fine. Further questions or comments, members? With none, gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to open the floor up for those members of the public that wish to address council, but before we do that, I would like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before the proposed community improvement plan is adopted and approved, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne to the Ontario Municipal Board. That also applies to our secondary plan on the table this evening. Further, it should be noted that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the city before the proposed community improvement plan or secondary plan is approved and adopted, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board, unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or a public body as a party to the OMB hearing. This time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to call upon if any member of the public wishes to address council.
Are there any members of the public that would like to address council on this planning hearing? With none, Mr. Aquino.
Yeah, okay. Would like to note, Mr. Mayor, that there is a sign-in sheet. If any member of the public wishes to receive notice, please ensure you sign that sign-in sheet with your name and address, and we will ensure that you will receive a notice. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Petroni would like to address council one last time.
Sure, Mr. Petroni.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to come back to Councillor Elliott's question about whether or not the city can offer an affordable housing grant or loan program if the region does not. I erred. In fact, it does say right in the community improvement plan, the affordable housing grant/loan program will only be offered by the city in the future if Niagara Region offers a matching grant loan program for affordable residential units to local municipalities. So, if the city wants to have the ability to offer an affordable housing grant loan program, even if the region doesn't, we would have to make a revision to that, and it's an easy revision, and I'm happy to do that if that's the direction of council. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Luch. That's fine, Councillor? Good, thank you. Further questions or comments, folks? With none, Mr. Aquino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What the intention is, as Mr. Petroni mentioned, we will have a recommendation report for your consideration of both the community improvement plan and the draft secondary plan for your consideration at an upcoming future council meeting. Mr. Mayor, this does conclude the public meeting under the Planning Act for these two pieces of important and relevant and historic policies and programs for the City of Port Colborne.
Very good, Dan. Just one question, Dan, before I ask for adjournment for this portion of the agenda. I'm assuming that because this will be so robust with incentives, not only as a waterfront CIP, but also with the brownfield CIP incentives and Luch, you can relate to this because you're working on this at the region, with the economic center, gateway center incentives. That'll all be included, that suite of incentives will all be included within that report. So that, therefore, council will get the bigger picture with respect to the overall package of incentives available with these particular lands.
Through Mr. Mayor, we can do that. I know that, as Mr. Petroni mentioned, there are certain programs that are being drafted right now under the Gateway CIP. Mm-hmm. We do know what the brownfield incentive programs are. So when we bring forward a recommendation report, the key is going to be focused on the CIP of the East Waterfront, but we will also include, if they are available, what incentive programs there are up at the region's Gateway Economic Center CIP.
Thanks, Dan. And the reason why I bring that up is because it is very robust. When we look at the incentives being offered within this CIP, the Economic Gateway CIP, as well as the Brownfield CIP, it will show very well as a package for those investors that may be interested in these specific lands, especially those lands that we're currently in discussions with Transport Canada. That here are, as you stated earlier, Mr. Smith, lands that were once industrial, very industrial, because most of it is slag, but with the incentives attached to those pieces of property, it gives an opportunity for that reinvestment on those particular lands. So, and even the lands going north of that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for future investment, and when you attach those incentives to that, it makes it a lot more doable versus people just sort of walking away from these lands because they may not seem as doable without the incentives.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, and we also are going to have our own industrial CIP that would also augment the regional Gateway CIP. There will be an open house in December on that. So that's just another CIP that we're going to have on our plate.
As well as the incentives that attach themselves to those CIPs.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Well done. Appreciate it. Members of council, I will now ask for a motion to adjourn this portion of the agenda. Mover and seconder, Councillor Bodner, Councillor Kenny. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We're now going to move on to the second part of our public hearing under the Planning Act, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Department of Planning and Development Services, report number 2011-87, subject to public hearing Report for a zoning bylaw amendment, file number D140811, 890 Pleasant Beach Road. Mr. Aquilina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an application that is being held under Section 34 of the Planning Act. It is an application submitted by Alan and Denise Horning for property, as you mentioned, located at 890 Pleasant Beach Road. It's in Part Lot 3, Concession 1. What the application proposes to do is to change the zoning of the property from the present Hamlet Development Zone and Hamlet Residential Zone to a site-specific Hamlet Residential Zone that would permit a proposed single-detached dwelling on the property, and also require a minimum rear yard setback of 169 meters from an existing barn located to the west of the property. The method of the meeting tonight was given in accordance with Section 3 of Ontario Regulation 545/06. On November 3rd, there was a poster placed on the property, and all property owners within 120 meters of the property were mailed a notice of tonight's meeting. The explanation to be followed this evening is I will present the Department of Planning and Development Report 2011-87. We will then open the floor for those members of the council that wish to address myself. We will then open the floor up for the applicant to address council if he or she wishes to do so. We will then give an announcement respecting written notice of passage for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and explanation of future meetings to be considered this evening. So at this time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to present the Planning and Development Report 2011-87. As I mentioned, the application was submitted by Denise and Alan Horning. It was a condition of a consent that this application be forwarded to council's consideration for a zoning change due to the fact that a portion of the property is zoned Hamlet Development. Condition requires that this be approved by City Council in order for the consent to be final and binding. When the notice was circulated, there was no comments that were received from any member of the public. The Building Division, Bylaw Enforcement Division, and Engineering Division, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority indicated that they had no objections to this application. The policies that affect this development this evening is that the city's official plan designates the land as Hamlet. This is part of the Shirkston Hamlet area. That Hamlet permits residential uses, neighborhood commercial uses, and rural agricultural uses and open space uses. The zoning of the property is Hamlet Residential and Hamlet Development. Both zones permit a single detached dwelling. The purpose that we're here this evening, however, is Section K of the official plan that states that any lands that are under a development zone, they're essentially a holding zone that wants consideration for potential and future land uses if it's not premature. Can it be adequately serviced? Is it in the best interest for those lands to the west and around the surrounding area to be in fact developed? If council considers that if a house is to be built on this property is going to have a negative impact on all the surrounding available lands in the immediate area, then council will be in a position not to support the zoning bylaw amendment. So it's important to note that that's why we are here this evening. As I mentioned, the application proposes a minimum rear yard setback of 169 meters. That is due to a livestock operation that is to the west of the property. This will ensure that if the house is built, it needs to be set back 169 meters due to the minimum distance separation formula calculation. That pretty much concludes the application before you this evening, Mr. Mayor. There is a sketch on the back of the application that kind of indicates the lands that would be subject to this application. There's parts 1 and 4 and parts 2 and 5. Parts 1 and 4 are proposed to be changed to the Hamlet Residential Zone in place of the Hamlet Development Zone.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Is the applicant in attendance, Dan?
I am not sure, Mr. Mayor.
I don't see the applicant in attendance, so I take it there's not going to be any comments from the applicant?
I would suppose there wouldn't be.
Or anybody representing the applicant? Okay. Are there any questions of clarification from members of council? With none, Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to read the following before we do open the meeting up to those members of the public that wish to address council. If a person or a public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the city to the Ontario Municipal Board. if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is approved, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. There is a sign-in sheet for those members of the public that wish to receive notice, but at this time, Mr. Mayor, I would like to open the floor up for those members of the public that wish to address council.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Are there any members of the public that would like to address council respecting this application? With none, Mr. Aquilina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to read this statement as well. If you wish to be notified of the approval of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make a written request to the clerk. Only those persons and public bodies that give the clerk a written request for the notice of the passage of the bylaw will be given such notice. This time, Mr. Mayor, this does conclude the public meeting under the Planning Act. I will have a recommendation report in the for council's consideration in the very near future in order for that consent application to become final and binding if council does indeed approve the zoning change.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. I appreciate your work on both these files, and we do look forward to those reports coming before members of council. With that, members of council, I ask for a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Elliott. With no further questions, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to our Committee of the Whole agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Elliott, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor Kenny.
Just with item 3, Your Worship, as I'm a member of Committee of Adjustment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 3 is I am a member of the Committee of Adjustment, and also item number 4 as I represent the company mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further disclosures, members? With none, we'll move on to the committee items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 16, and I could pull item 3 and 4 if, for the conflicts.
Further items? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7, item 10, item 18, and item 20.
Councillor Butters.
Item 8, please.
Councillor Kenny.
I'll speak to item 7 as well, Your Worship.
Councillor Danch. Councillor Doucette, you're fine. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 16 and item 26.
Okay. I think we pretty well covered all the items there. I'm also going to lift item 12 and 13. So if I can have a member of council lift that, please. Councillor Kenny. 12 and 13. Okay. We'll now move on to Peter. Do you want one lifted? Pardon me? Okay. So I can have a member of council lift that. Councillor Doucette. Members of council, I'll ask for a motion to receive and pass the remainder of the items. Councillor Butters, for those 2 items, out of 26. Councillor Demeray, questions or comments? Members of council, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We do have one delegation this evening, members. We have Mr. Jake and Wendy Bass with respect to a bill received from the city with regard to sidewalk repairs located in front of 160 Elm Street here in the city of Port Colborne. Mr. and Mrs. Bass, come on up. Welcome. By the way, before you start, you guys did a fantastic job on that home. From the way it was compared to the way it is now, it's just a phenomenal job to both of you. Congratulations, well done. So welcome, the floor is yours. Jake, if you just want to press the gray button there, and if you just want to state your name, your address, and as I said, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Jake Bass. This is my wife, Wendy. We've operated a farm on Miller Road for Forever. Well, about 46 years, I guess, something like that. So we're well accustomed to building things. Built my first barn when I was 18 years old. Built a house on Miller Road. Anyways, everybody, I think, has a copy, a short story here of what proceeded here, and I have kind of got it more in detail that I'd like to read off, and I have to type it because else I'd forget half of it. So I thought, anyways, if I could read that to you. Fortunately, I got to get these things out. Okay. On 160 Elm Street, Port Colborne is supposedly our future retirement home, and we've moved in a while back, and we really like it there. Everything is very accessible and that, and we have a lot of nice neighbors so far. And like I say, we're still farming and on Miller Road as well. My wife has, or my daughter has moved into our residence at Miller Road and is helping us out with some of the business. But anyways, we're pretty upset over the sidewalk issue that has come up regarding a replacement sidewalk on 160 Elm Street. In 2010, we purchased 160 Elm Street with the intentions of adding on and moving into town. I would like to make a comment at this time on the fact that the Planning Department, Bylaws Department, Building Department, and Building Inspector and everybody has treated us exceptionally well. They did their job efficiently and made the process very enjoyable to build this home. The department that handled the sidewalks, although, has been a different story. Before we got involved with concrete trucks and delivery trucks, we took photos of the damaged sidewalk in front of our new home, just in case we would need it later. As you can see, there are weeds growing in the cracks. It was not recent damage. Weeds don't grow that fast in concrete. They do in soybean fields, but that's besides the point. Another photo shows us the edges of the sidewalk with yellow paint on them. While campaigning, Mayor Badaway stopped in to give us a speech, of course, and hoping we would vote for him. But anyway, mentioned to me if I had any questions or concern to contact him, and so I did. And he spoke with the department that handles the sidewalks, and they did eventually come out at the sidewalks. The gentleman, along with two young women, they had photos of the sidewalk before we started that looked very strange to me and unidentifiable. But they said it had been taken at different times and was pieced together by computer technology. At the end of our conversation, I agreed that there were 5 damaged sidewalk sections, as they did. They said I damaged 5, and I said I damaged 3. Since I have the photos showing the 2 damaged beyond repair before I started, the gentleman said the cost per section was $65 per section. So therefore, I thought I owed them $195, and they thought I owed $325. They were very abrasive and accused me of damaging the whole sidewalk and argued with me. They say if I didn't pay, they would take the money out of my cleanup deposit on my building permit. We maintained that we did not damage more than 3 sidewalk sections, and the city came along and replaced the sidewalk and did a very nice job. but I have been billed for $1,288.74, which shocked me. Mayor Badway asked me to be on hand when the work was done because he could see that the way I had the new driveway laid and the wood at the end of the driveway, I was trying to accommodate the concrete people, but installing a straight board at the end of my pavement. The reason this was needed was because the whole sidewalk was like a fishbowl, and I didn't want my new driveway pavement poured in the same fashion. So I put wood at the end of the new poured driveway, and nice and straight, so the sidewalk could be laid in the same fashion, and it would all blend in and match up. Before I knew they were even on the scene, the concrete preparation team cut off 8 inches of my new driveway, and this was not necessary. All they had to do was pour the concrete against the new pavement, and I could take my board out, and the pavement company was going to patch it in, including in my initial payment for the paving. The concrete contractors were very helpful and courteous. I asked them if it would be possible to pour concrete up to the pavement where they had cut it out, and the foreman asked his supervisor, and it was done that way. We are happy with the results, but not the invoice. During the early days of construction of the addition, my wife happened to see someone painting yellow stripes on some of the sidewalk sections. Upon asking what he was doing, he said he was marking sections that they were going to go under and lift and try to straighten out. My wife suggested he not waste the city's funds by doing this, since big trucks were coming to the building site in the next couple of weeks and might damage it more anyways. He thanked her and left. In this case, we probably saved the city some money. There were 11 sections of sidewalks poured in all. I don't know why they extended the work that far. It may be not because it was sunken lower than the rest of the sidewalk on the street, and if they wanted to level it, we did not damage the sections in front of the old house or at the end, south end at the corner. The only damage were in the center, where the paved driveway is, and two were beyond repair, as far as I was concerned. Just as a final note, it would be nice if homeowners would be notified of work being done in front of their home, especially when it entails taking out the whole sidewalk. The day they cut out the old concrete was the day before we had planned to move into the house, and we had to cancel our plans and put our helpers on hold. Also, a young woman was measuring the north side of Kent Street, and I ran out to ask what it was about. I said, I hope I don't get any more bills for that. I have enough trouble with the front sidewalk. And she answered that that's not all of it yet, and left. Now, I don't know what exactly that meant, and regarding that is the above, where they dug out on Kent Street has to do with the water, the main shutoff. It was unidentifiable that it was a shutoff. It was just a big ball of rust, so they had to dig up there and replace their shutoff and put a new line and hook it up to our new line into the house. And Ken Cressy told us that there would be no charges for this, because that was not our problem, I guess. And there would be no cost to us. So I don't know what else to tell you. All I know is that the sidewalk to the far south was very unlevel this way. It was this much above the pavement of the road, and the rest, it should be flat with the road like the rest of the sidewalk is on that part of the street. I think the water ran into it and underneath, and over the years it's heaved the concrete up. So I guess they took a matter in their own hands and decided just to fix it all, because it was all this way and that way, and it was a mess to begin with. I've already paid $220 for the 3 sections that I feel I'm responsible for, And I just don't think I should be paying for a whole sidewalk. I just don't feel right about that. And I do have some pictures here, which I should have handed out sooner, but that's how it goes. Like I say, I'm not a stranger when it comes to construction. I've built every building pretty well on the farm, including my house at the farm. And I'm pretty upset over this whole sidewalk thing. I'm a strong believer in principles. And my wife is a little softer in these things. To me, I shouldn't be paying anything because the sidewalks that I've paid for were beyond repair as far as I was concerned. And I don't know what else to tell you.
Okay, Jake.
But so anyway, that's how I feel about it. And I actually, when we did our paved driveway, they couldn't fix the sidewalk yet. So I patched up. You'll probably see it in some of the pictures, I believe, that are over there somewhere. I paved over about 8 feet of the sidewalk with paving because I told the guy it's like this and like that. I don't want some people to fall down. So we paved over top of the sidewalk just to make it smooth so nobody would get hurt in the process. So
The city did attempt to patch it first. They brought a blob of pavement and dropped it there, and I think somebody stepped on it a couple times, but we felt it wasn't safe, so we had the paver pave over it so it'd be, and that's, I think, in a picture somewhere.
So, anyway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bass.
Okay.
Members of council, are there any questions or comments from the presenter or to the presenter? Councillor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When you figure that 3 sections were damaged, and then somebody came to you and said they differed with the number, and they said 5, but you'd already taken pictures of your 3 sections, and then on either side of that. So how does it come out like that? They figure they took pictures to show the state of it before they got working on their place. So how does it come about that now they are to pay for the additional sections? Like I'm trying to understand that part of it.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Hanson for that. But first, if I can just ask, is there any questions to the presenters? I don't want to have them standing up here while we're actually questioning staff. So to the presenter, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the pictures, because we got pictures from the city in as well.
Okay.
And when I look at the number of sections in front of your driveway now, in front of your paved driveway, and if I'm counting the number of sections, there's 5. So no matter what, to me, there's 5. You've paid for 3. You owe us for 2. That's what I think. Because I count, and they were all replaced in front of your driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And even the ones where you had a paver, kind of pave over top
Yes.
of city property, I understand that, but I count 5. So I just wanted that clarification.
Okay.
When I take a picture, and your pictures that you just showed us, it shows 5 sections.
So, Councillor, your question?
That's all. That's it. That's what I want to say. Is there 5 sections of sidewalk in front of your present paved driveway?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bass?
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
And
Councillor.
the other problem I have is I was quoted $65 per section. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
very
Councillor.
much.
No, any further questions to the presenters? Councillor Bodner, before you go, Jake. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jake or Wendy. That 5 sections we're looking at in a photo, and I guess it's photo C that's crossed off in our handout from the city. You're maintaining that you didn't damage all of those. Some of those were damaged.
Yes.
Before you even started.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's
Okay.
paint growing in the cracks, and there's yellow paint from the people that were going to repair them before we had even entered the picture.
Yeah, we can see the arrow quite clearly there,
Yeah.
I think. So, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions or comments to the presenters? With none, Mr. and Mrs. Bass, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Members of council, any questions or comments, members of staff? Councillor Butters, you got a question for staff? Mr. Hanson, you wanted to comment on Councillor Butters' question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We provide the council with a sort of a rationale and a breakdown of what we think is fair on the sidewalk repair and the total cost for the work. The total cost for the work done on this site abutting the driveway and just beyond the driveway at 160 Elm was $1,600. That's strictly the construction cost. There's no overheads on that and no city time involved with that. The city's share of the sidewalks beyond the width of the driveway are $531. The invoice to the Basses is $1,110 plus HST. As you can see from the photos, it would be very difficult with the sidewalk. That's a 10.8 meter sidewalk. It would be very difficult to go in there and replace 1 or 2 blocks, skip an older block, which wasn't damaged, and then go on to the next block. Anybody putting a driveway in for any type of entrance with vehicles going over it, you want a 6-inch lift of concrete within it. Okay? This driveway is 10.8 meters beyond the 7.4 meter maximum width for driveways that are allowed. What the staff have done here is tried to make a presentable installation here, which is the entire width of the driveway that the Basses have constructed at a 6-inch depth. So included in that width of the driveway for them are some of the damage panels as well as the width of the driveway. So anybody making an application for a new entrance, if you had a curb and gutter entrance and any other streets, they'd be requested to replace the curb, cut the curb, or replace the sidewalks to the proper depths on the sidewalk as part of the development. This has been replaced at the city's cost on the current contract at $1,600. We think it's fair from our side of it to replace the width of the driveway itself to make it a proper driveway entrance for the location. That's the cost for it, and if council has any idea to reduce that, I mean, that can be done, but it's currently paid under the current sidewalk contract.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson again. I do understand that there are 3 broken pieces of sidewalk, but there are 5 included in the replacement because of where the breaks were. That's not what's in question to me. The problem I have with this is that someone from the city has quoted $65 per section to the homeowner, and that's what worries me. Do we have a practice of providing some quote in writing, or how do homeowners get to find out what it is that's going to cost them?
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, typically when a homeowner makes a request like this, we have the current prices for the contract, and we can provide them a fairly good estimate of what has to be done. The unfortunate part of this, it seems there was no agreement in terms of what was damaged and what was going to be replaced. And I think that's where the communications really broke down on it. We can provide that estimate, and we try to put that in writing if we can. It sounds to me like perhaps one of our field people had provided an estimate of $65 per panel. If that's the case, I'm not aware of that. But we can provide good estimates based on the current contract prices in most cases.
Councillor?
But did we? That's what I'm asking. Did we provide something in writing? Because otherwise the homeowner only has the verbal quote to go with.
Mr. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't confirm that. Somebody from the field office, out in the field from our office, has provided that, so I don't doubt that did happen. I think there was a communications breakdown in providing the total estimate. And I think the entire scope of the work seems to be the problem. Providing a proper driveway entrance across the entire length of the 10.8 meters seems to be what's in contention here. And whether any of that should have been done. I think the bottom line here for the city and for staff is if the house wasn't constructed, we wouldn't have been putting 10.8 meters of concrete in there. It's for the new driveway, and that's what was actually built.
That's fine. Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Worship. Well, Ron, just one more question in regards to that. So when the worker came out, we see the markings on here with the arrow, so obviously these sections of sidewalk prior to their construction were going to be replaced anyway. They were going to be done because there's arrows there to say there's one where there's a definite trip hazard, you can see it. There's one where there's an arrow kind of in the middle of the driveway where they put that little bit of asphalt, and the other one where you can definitely see there's no You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know there's quite a big lip there where there would have been. Would they have been replaced? They told us they were going to do construction, so not to replace them because they didn't want them broken. So would they have been replaced in our normal sidewalk maintenance program?
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, I'm told that these sidewalks were not up for replacement. There were some low section areas, and I think when you see the arrows that go from the corner to the driveway, those are sections of which I spoke to earlier, where you wouldn't want to leave just one or two panels of older sidewalk. We have the new section of sidewalk across the driveway, fairly new corner accessibility at Kent Street, so it's a matter of just replacing the remainder of it, and that's at city cost, not at the cost of the homeowners. So there was nothing in there that was going to be replaced on the current program that was a trip hazard. In fact, there was grass growing in some of the joints. In the expansion joints, that's not unusual. That happens. There's not necessarily a trip there.
Councillor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just then, so what are the arrows there for, Ron? Why were the arrows placed there? They're painted arrows.
Mr. Hanson?
The painted arrows on, are you referring to that photo there? Yeah, that's the painted arrows to replace from that point. At that point, they had determined how much of the sidewalk is going to be replaced. That section where that arrow goes to the driveway, if you look at the second last plan on here, you'll see the distance. I think it's the second last one.
I can see there was, it looks to me like, Ron, just correct me if I'm wrong, that there's one block, which would be the corner of Kent, I think it's Kent. There's one block, and then there's an arrow, a white arrow painted on the next section of sidewalk, which is probably 2 sections before we come to the driveway. Yeah.
That's an indication of the start of where we're going to tear it out and replace it.
So you were starting not at the corner, then not at the corner, but at one from the corner. Is that right? Am I doing that right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But the point would be here, if you're referring to the paint on that.
That's one. There's one arrow there, yeah.
Well, the point is those were damaged during the construction.
Oh, okay, because it's my understanding that they repaired the damage when they had the house. Their
Where
driveway
the
paint.
asphalt is, just so we're talking about the same thing. There's some paint here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we do that sometimes too, right?
Yes.
Put asphalt down instead of
As a temporary
concrete.
measure until
As
the
a temporary
contract is
measure, right.
available.
So as a temporary measure, were we going to go back and put a concrete slab there? Were we going to do that or no? Not this year, not.
Well, if that was damaged during the construction of the home, that's a temporary repair. If it wasn't damaged prior to the construction of the home, it wasn't marked that way prior to the construction of the home.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor Bodder and Councillor Elliott.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Hanson. So you're saying that all those 5 sections were damaged by the homeowner when the construction was done?
Mr. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we had 5 sections marked or agreed to, well, not agreed to, 5 sections that we had observed on the site that were damaged during the construction.
Okay,
so
I guess it's he said, she said, because they claim that these pictures were taken before construction and that sidewalk doesn't look in very good shape. So I guess I don't know how to resolve this, but, you know, there seems like there could be some give and take here if there is some problem with what they were quoted and pictures that supposedly show before we started a sidewalk that looks in pretty bad shape. So I don't know, I'd just like to see some kind of a resolution if we can work something out with the homeowner.
Thank you, Councillor. We have Councillor Elliott and Councillor Butters again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ron. With the total price of $1,600, how do we come in a division of $500 is our responsibility and $1,100 is to the city?
Mr. Hanson?
Or to the property owner, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There's a plan, first photo after the invoice showing the orange cones. And you can see a dimension. There's 3 separate sections on the sidewalk with the dimension on it. So the dimensions of the driveway, the sidewalk across the driveway, and then there's 2 sections, A and C, at each end. Those are the city share, which are beyond the driveway, which were completed to the corner. But the driveway itself is the point of the invoice to the homeowner, which is the middle section. That's how the invoice is compiled.
Councillor?
So in that photo, their total distance is 10 meters.
10.8 meters.
10.8 for a total cost of $1,110. And we did 7.6. So we're not that far off of what we replaced for them. And yet their cost is double what ours is, which I find hard to believe. It almost seems like they've taken pictures and the sidewalk wasn't that bad. Yep, they admit they broke them. And then we just kind of went in and said, well, while we're here, we'll just fix the whole run and attributed the whole length of the driveway to them, even though the sidewalk was broken before they even started. We weren't going to fix it. Now that while we're here, we're going to fix it. And it's, to me, you know, we're only 3 meters short of what their section is, and yet we're paying 1/3 of the cost. When we didn't fix, we fixed more than 1/3 of the entire project. So I don't understand how we're only taking 1/3 of the cost when we fixed more than 1/3. Right? You've got 3.3 meters, and you've got 4.3 meters, which is 7.6 meters total for us, and you've got 10.8 for them. Right? The section C is 3.3, section A is 4.3, that's 7.6. You've got section B, which is the total length of the driveway, which is 10.8. It just seems that we're attributing more of the cost to them than what it should be. It doesn't seem like our section is
Mr. Mayor, the 6-inch sidewalk is more expensive than the 4-inch sidewalk. Now, that's the increase in cost. It's a higher unit rate across the driveway.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Further questions, Councillor? Councillor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to draw everybody's attention to the letter from Jake. And in the very first paragraph, and it says, you know, about during the construction of their home, and they knew we would be driving over the already damaged sidewalk, and my wife took pictures, even showing weeds growing in the cracks where the sidewalk was broken. And then it's written, she also noticed a worker a few weeks later painting a yellow stripe on the seam of 2 of the other section of sidewalk, and then they're told that is going to, and he's marking them because they're going to be raised in the next day or two. And Wendy goes on, that says, you know, that they really not to fix anything because they're still going to be driving over this truck. So, like she states very clearly what they're told during this construction, these things are going to be raised up. So to me, it sounds like work was going to happen there. The workers were said, well, hang on, you know, we got trucks driving over this thing. Don't fix anything at this point. So I'm still not understanding why they got charged the amount of money for what to me seems to be like the whole enchilada when it should have been a short section.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Members of Council, are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want, and this is, Mr. Aquilina is going to do it in his department, and I think we should really start thinking about that. And that is, in regards to a person coming in and being told something. We had a gentleman in this, we had this planning thing tonight. That gentleman was told one thing. He said staff told him another. So now Mr. Aquilina, when somebody comes in for a planning person, is going to hand him a piece of paper that says it's this much for this and this much for that. So there's not going to be any more he said, she said. I think the same thing should have happened here. I think that you said that probably happened, that they probably quoted him a price of $65. If he would have been given a written estimate, I think that would have covered all bases. And I think that's something that we should probably think about implementing. If it doesn't exist, maybe it does exist, Ron, and if it does exist, then Mr. Bass should have been given that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of Council, any further questions or comments? There is a request here by the resident to forgive the costs of the work. I'll be looking for direction from council. Is there a motion? Councillor Demeray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that the resident be charged the $65 that he was quoted by a city staff member per section, and deduct from that the payment that has already been made.
Thank you, Councillor. Have a seconder to that, please. Councillor Bodner. Are there any questions or comments to that resolution? All those in favor?
That's for 5 sections.
Opposed? That would be carried. Councillor Demery, just for clarity, that was for 5 sections or 3 sections?
5 sections.
For the 5 sections, okay. That would be carried. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Bass. Appreciate your time tonight. Did you folks have any questions before you take off, Jake and Wendy?
No, but I would like to say that Colborne is a great place to live.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. And thank you, members of council. Ron, thank you as well. Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, could I have one point of clarification on the 5 sections? Is it an invoice for the 5 sections at the actual cost, or 5 sections times $65?
Right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
If I can add too, I think I heard staff direction as well in the discussion, in particular by Councillor Kenny, that the residents, as Mr. Bass had recognized, that contact be made with the residents. I'm sure staff always does that, but sometimes they miss, they miss, people aren't home in that. So if we can solidify that, but as well any quotes or estimates that be done on paper beforehand. So we'll take that as staff direction. Okay. Thank you. Members of council, we're now going to move on to the regional council's report. Councillor Barrick, who's been waiting here very patiently. Councillor Barrick, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not lost on me either that it's 2 meetings now that you haven't had a mayor's report, so I'm not sure if you're making room for myself or we're alternating or what's going on. But so tonight I'm going to speak a little bit about the 2012 to 2015 council business plan at the region, of which, of course, Mr. Mayor, you were a part of creating as well. Council began development of the new 2012-2015 business plan in the spring of this year to identify themes, overarching strategic objectives, and actions to achieve a number of priorities over the next 4 years. The 2012-2015 council business plan themes are a responsive region, healthy communities, open for business, environmental responsibility, integrated transportation system, governance review, public engagement, and communications. Each theme has a number of specific action items that are strategic and tactical in nature, but direct efforts toward the achievement of the broader objectives. A stakeholder consultation strategy has now been executed, and the results of which indicate a high degree of interest and support for the themes and actions. The corporate management team, which are the commissioners as well as the chair, has seized a number of opportunities to engage staff to inform them of the new plan, development, and assist staff to understand council's priorities. It's important to emphasize a few key messages. While a few major items will carry forward from the previous plan, this is a new plan and not a status quo or continuation of the previous plan. Priority directions of the new plan include a need for improvement, desire for positive change, measuring our performance, finding efficiencies and cost reductions while improving customer service, improving economic conditions in Niagara, examining taxation policy, helping to address unemployment, poverty, affordable housing, and homelessness, and while a 4-year plan, it has to be flexible and dynamic to remain relevant to the taxpayers we serve. This was passed, Mr. Mayor, at our last council meeting, and we will see copies, hard copies made, as well as an online version, which I'll be happy to send to council once it's ready. That's my report this evening. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Barrick. Members of council, any questions or comments to his report? Or members of council, questions or comments to the regional councillor? With none, David, you got off lucky tonight. Thank you, Councillor Barrick. I appreciate that. Members of council will now move on to councillors' items and new business. Councillor Butters and Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make sure that you all realize you have an invitation extended from the Sherkson Community Center for the Christmas potluck, the first Sunday in December, December 4th, 5 o'clock. It's a wonderful potluck. Jolly Old Elf shows up for the enjoyment of children of all ages. So I hope that some of our councillors can make it and join us. And you, Mr. Mayor, of course. It would be wonderful if you could come.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm hoping to come. If I can get out of my other one early enough, I will be there. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, a few weeks ago, Councillor Butters was actually approached by a resident asking for some assistance with parking on Elizabeth Street by École Saint-Joseph. Councillor Doucette then took it upon himself to get a hold of the staff at the school and asked for their comment. Their comment just came through, and somehow it got passed to me to bring it forward to council tonight. And I will just read the letter that comes from the director at the school. It says, our staff and our parent council had a discussion regarding the standby signs in front of our school. We were wondering if it would be possible to push them further so our parents can park at the end of the school day to pick up their children. It would be best for the security of our students. As of now, only a few parents can park there, and all others have to park on the opposite side of the street, opposite to the school. Therefore, it makes the situation very difficult to control the security of our students. If any further information is needed, please do not hesitate to contact me. And that is written by Muriel Thibault-Gauthier. I'll submit the letter, if staff could look into this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doucette.
Just a correction. Councillor Butters is the one that contacted the school, because I personally have a conflict with that. I have, my grandchildren are there, and I go get them in that area all the time. So I definitely have a conflict in that once this comes back to council. So, but you're right.
Well, thank you, Councillor Doucette, and I'm sort of perplexed by the comments that were made by the school, because I too had two daughters. I went to that school for 8 years, 9 years, JK, senior, actually 10 years, including JK. And we were always told not to park in that area because of the buses that are parked in the area, and told to park on the opposite side of the road. So I'm actually at a loss with respect to the request. So what I would think we should do is have staff go over there and talk to the school. Pardon me, Mr. Hanson or Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a ticket issued. There is a no standing zone there for that simple reason. It is a bus loading zone. We do have the parking to the north that is prohibited due to the construction of the facility. And also, council is going to have for their consideration the bulk water station, which may have an effect on permitting parking to the north there. So, but we definitely will bring a report forward for council's consideration, but I'll leave it at that. I'm not sure if it will be a positive report, but it'll be there for council's consideration.
Well, I think the best thing to do, thanks, Dan, and I think the best thing to do is just simply go to the school and talk to the folks and clarify. Cause again, I'm sort of at a loss, because I know as a parent we were always told to park on the east side of the street, not the west side, because that was the bus loading zone, and they were very specific about that. So if we can just send staff over there to just have a discussion with them and come back with, I won't say a lengthy report, but just a report to council that would then articulate what their thoughts are, and of course your recommendation attached to that. That's fine. Councillor Butters, you had a comment?
Only that when I spoke to the principal there, and basically the parent had contacted me, so I contacted the school and said, you know, what did they think? Because, you know, they're the people who work there and whatever. So she had checked with her her staff, and then I said, well, then put that in the form of a letter then. And I think that what they were hoping was that only like 1 or 2 of the no standing signs could be removed to allow a little bit of parking behind where the buses, I guess, pull in, going north from the school. So, I mean, I'm not talking all the way back, just like 1 or 2 taken out, so give them a little bit more room. Right now, they have a staff person that actually comes out and is making sure that it's safe for the kids to get across the road when they're being picked up and dropped off and whatever. So I'm just going by what the principal...
And that's the challenge, because the buses do line up on the west side of the road.
Absolutely.
And of course the kids go in between the buses and they pop out on Elizabeth Street. And as you know, it's a busy street, and you got parents on the other side of the road. So there's no question there's a situation there, but let's have staff go over there and
Yeah.
see what we can do.
And
see what we
that's
can
all
have
we're
in place.
asking for, some review on the matter to see if they could create a little bit more space behind the buses
Right.
going north.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, and it doesn't particularly pertain to this, but it's just a question that, and I noticed this at other schools, we put site plan control on all kinds of businesses that have to have so much parking for, all of their customers and everything. Do we ever do that on a school? And I know these schools have been there for a long time, so, but it just seems that we put the onus on businesses that they have to have the proper amount of parking to handle their clients, and schools never have enough to handle the people picking up their kids, so just a question.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Mr. Aquilino?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, if a new school was built, we have to ensure that they have adequate supply of parking on site. The fact that these schools have historically been there prior to the zoning bylaw, there's nothing we can do that proactively insists they do have parking.
Okay. Members, any further questions or comments? Any further new business? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've been asked by some business people on the east side to bring this up, and I'm not sure what we can do about it, but I'm going to bring it up. If someone buys gas in Port Colborne, especially in the last 8 months, you've paid anywhere from 3, 5, 6, 7 cents more than a lot of the communities around us. These particular individuals have spoken to their clients, and what they're saying is that because of the gas prices, people are going to the other communities getting gas, and then they stay there and buy their groceries and do their shopping and do everything else, and they're losing out on money. One of the individuals specifically said, well, why doesn't the city send out a letter to all these gas stations or whatever and do something about it? I'm not sure what the mechanism is, and I indicated that to him, but I told him I would bring it to this table and see if there is anything we can do. And I really don't know who to address this to. But if we could have some kind of response that I can give this individual, I would appreciate a response.
Councillor Bodner.
Well, I agree that it can be frustrating paying that. I'm not about to, as a member of council, to dictate to somebody what they can charge for their product. I think that people are dictating to them. If they don't sell enough gas, maybe they'll get down to where it is. But I don't know if we want to go there. I don't want you telling me what I sell bread for. So,
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Any further comments? Okay, thank you. Any further new business? You notice I'm not touching that one, eh? Like Councillor Bodner, I know what I would say if somebody came up to me and asked me or told me how to run my business, so I'll leave that one alone. Any further new business, members of council? With none, we'll now move on to staff. Any new business, guys? Any updates? Mr. Aquilino?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mentioned it earlier, but there is an open house for our industrial CIP. It will be on December the 8th, 5 to 7:30 p.m., third floor.
Okay, great, thank you. With no further new business, we'll now move on. Mr. Sinez.
Just a reminder of the budget meeting, December 5th, on next Monday, at 5:30 in the council chambers.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sinez.
One little quick.
Councilor,
I would be
go ahead.
remiss if I don't.
Go ahead.
Because I do sit on the BIA, don't forget this Saturday, 1 o'clock, Tugboat Santa. Santa comes in. Boy, I almost forgot that one. And after Santa arrives, there's a little parade over to the former Rossman store and pictures with Santa, minimum charge or maximum charge, $5, which is pretty good. Museum too? Oh yeah. Christmas at the museum on Sunday to follow. Yeah, so don't forget that. Come and have tea and pudding at the museum and Tugboat Santa on Saturday. It's a don't miss event.
We have a full weekend of Christmas activities. Mr. Makins?
And Santa Claus Parade, Saturday night. So as Santa gets off the tugboat, we're on foot.
Maybe one tired man by the end of the day, eh? Yeah. Members of council, any further comments, questions? New business, members of staff, we're fine. Let's move on now to the adoption of the minutes. We do have a set of minutes from the 27th meeting regular of Committee of the Whole, dated November 14th, 2011. Members of council, I need a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Desmarais. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move on to the items that were lifted. Let's get comfortable, because there's a few of them. Members of council, if you don't mind, I'm going to lift items 12 and 13 first, as we do have a presentation with respect to the inflow and infiltration reduction program. So first off, I'm going to have a member of council put item 12 on the floor. Councillor Kenny, I was going to call you Member Kenny. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you. That the Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report number 2011-17, subject update report on the arena pumping station catchment area extraneous flows reduction program be approved, recommending that the update report on the arena be received for information purposes. However, we have a delegation here to tell us all about how successful we've been on that. So, welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder on that? Councillor Danch? Before I go to questions or comments, we do have Mr. Watt here, who is the manager of the Associated Engineering Group. Mr. Watt, welcome. And,
Thank you.
You're going to give us all the updated information and all the good news.
Excellent.
Welcome.
It's most refreshing being here tonight because most of the presentations that I make involve informing councils of a long list of deficiencies within their systems, accompanied by a long list of capital works required. So tonight's presentation is going to be decidedly different. I'm David Watt. I'm the project manager for this project and the subsequent projects. Sue Noble joins me tonight, who's project engineer. I'm working on this project since 2008, and as a result, I put some background information, or we've put some background information in to get the new members of council since the project started up to date. So what is inflow and infiltration? I guess first and foremost, your wastewater collection system in the city of Port Colborne was not designed to capture stormwater. It was designed to capture wastewater, which primarily comes from industry, commercial business, and residences. And it's basically all that water which is used inside the home or inside the business. So there's two types of extraneous flow. I believe this is outlined in your council report. One is inflow. So that's rainwater when it rains heavily, or even when it rains fairly lightly in the arena area. We get water entering the wastewater system. So some of those sources are sump pumps, weeping tiles, perhaps catch basins or roof drains that are directed directly to the sanitary sewer. Infiltration, on the other hand, is groundwater derived. It can flow all year. It comes through cracks, open joints in the wastewater piping. So why did staff embark on an inflow and infiltration reduction program? In many areas of Port Colborne, as with virtually every other municipality in North America, peak flows exceed sewer and pump station capacities. When that happens, the water has to go somewhere. And it either goes to the environment, or it ends up in someone's basement, or it requires staff intervention by the way of bypass pumping, tanking it or pumping it to a natural waterway. The real reason to optimize these systems is to create capacity for development, is to claw back that which you've lost. And the money statement, if there is one tonight, we've assessed the city of Port Colborne wastewater system. We figure you're spending about $1 million annually in treating rainwater, which is inflow and infiltration. It's clean water, it shouldn't be there. We need to get it out. The Ministry of the Environment has a role to play in terms of wastewater collection system management. In around 2005, which is 3 years prior to the inception of this project, they advised all Niagara area municipalities, you're not alone in having a wet weather problem, I assure you of that, to conform to different procedures. These are guidelines that basically dictate how much of the wet weather flow you'll capture and you won't let spill or bypass pump or obviously end up in people's basements. If you can't capture, if you can't separate this flow, you got to build tanks. So there's a number of alternative solutions. One is build bigger sewers. So bigger sewer means you can move that excess rainwater to another point of the city where invariably it may spill or create problems in that area. You can build storage tanks, so they're meant to capture all this rainwater. They store it. We wait for the rainfalls to subside. The wastewater is then pumped back into the system, and you treat it at the regional wastewater treatment plant. Pretty expensive devices, capitally intensive. There's been a number of previous studies in the arena area as well as citywide. I'm not going to belabor them, but basically the recommendations out of these studies was there needed to be an aggressive program to remove extraneous flow from your systems, to claw back that capacity. And that program needed to be on public and private property. A lot of these programs focus on public property only. This program is an all-in. It looks at residences and it looks at the right-of-way. The second thing to note here is Arena West, or that area which is tributary to the Arena pump station, was the first priority, given that the previous consultants had identified it as the highest inflow and infiltration area in the city. So this is the pilot study area. If you look to your monitors there, it's approximately 470 properties. The Arena pump station is around here. Again, identified as a priority area. This slide says 7 times the Ministry of the Environment guidelines for flow. In the Arena area, between base dry weather flow and peak wet weather flow, so when you get a good rainfall above an inch, you get over 10 times the base. The wet weather flow would be 10 times the base flow. So you're paying to treat all that water. It's a sufficiently large area to gauge success. It needs to be fairly large in that the equipment to monitor wet weather flow and dry weather flow needs a certain amount of homes tributary to it, or a certain amount of flow to function. So what did it involve? What did the program involve? We authored some legislation in conjunction with Sarah Premi of Sullivan Manny. That's a sewer use bylaw that prohibits stormwater, anyone from putting stormwater into your sanitary sewer system. There was tons of public education. There were in excess of 7 mailouts to the properties in the area. There was an inspection of all homes, inspection of all sanitary sewers. And when we identified something, contrary to a lot of other projects, this is a program. We identified something, we fixed it. We then went back and measured the impact that those fixes had. And again, the success of the program relied on 100% public participation, and we do this sort of program in other areas in Niagara. And I'd like to say that Port Colborne's been probably, the residents of Port Colborne have been the most easy to deal with in terms of their participation in the program. So the new bylaw allows the city, Ron's staff, our staff, we're a designate to enter upon private premises to inspect for sources of inflow. It provides for financial support where you have monies budgeted in that year's budget to assist people in disconnecting those sources of inflow. And it also includes punitive measures, basically a fine structure that if someone decides not to comply, you can take them to court and levy a fine. No fines were levied during the entire project. The public education seemed to have the desired impact. So the private property investigation involved a crew going out, inserting a video camera in every sewer lateral, inspecting every home, their plumbing, inspecting their lot for private catch basins, and all of the things listed here. We use a pretty sophisticated system to store all the results. There's a lot of information coming from these inspections, so we prioritized our rehabilitation program and our public outreach using what's called a geographic information system. So the private property results, service connections in the arena area are in generally good condition. This is the pipe that extends from the house to the main sanitary sewer. Generally, we didn't see a whole lot of problems, and we definitely didn't see any leaks. No downspouts or area drain connections, meaning weeping tile was not connected to the sanitary sewer. We did find 16 sump pumps. Now, 16 sump pumps doesn't sound like a lot, but the nominal capacity of a sump pump is about 25 US gallons per minute. And the problem is not just one sump pump, it's the collection of 16 discharging all at one time when it rains, which can quickly overload a section of sewer and or the pump station. So city staff was instrumental in affecting private property repairs to the tune of about $42,000. Of more note is we found 5 damaged laterals, which I'll talk a bit more, I've got a bit of video for actually, that were contributing a lot of inflow to the system. We inspected all the sewers. We actually wrote a new contract for city staff here. And all the areas that you see in red here are areas where the sewer system was leaking significantly. Some of these areas had previous spot repairs applied to them, meaning somebody had fixed it in the past and it had failed a long time ago. It also allowed us to look at any flow restrictions that may cause basement flooding and the general structural and operating condition of the sewer system. So here's the money shot if you want one. Hopefully it's showing. So the sewer on the left is, I don't know if I can see it here. This is not during rainfall. This is infiltration. This was happening pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So this on your left, that's the, I guess you know about the importance of controlling leaks in your home with respect to your water bill. This is a pretty significant leak. This is a 12-inch sewer, I believe. So what we did was come back. This is the post of that very same area. What we've done is sealed the leak with a grout. We've then put in a structural liner, which has a 75-year design life. So it's bonded to the pipe to make sure that that leak never comes back. The total cost of repairs was around $60,000. As you'll see, those will pay off fairly quickly. Excuse me. A lot of these programs don't have any measures of success or performance indicators. This one did. We assessed the system for 6 months under existing conditions, meaning sump pumps connected, leaks, what have you. We confirmed the big surprise, the previous studies. There's high flows, high sustained flows after it rained. And we had some issues with respect to sewer surcharging. That's when the sewer fills. So there were some operational issues at a local pump station that we actually had resolved in conjunction with city staff in the region. Under the repaired conditions, there was a significant reduction in flow. I've got a slide for that. There's no more surcharging, no more filling of the sewers in the area. But isolated high flows still remained. These isolated high flows remained for 2 days after it rained. 2 to 2.5 days. So what we did was all these areas here, our flow monitors, we just kept moving them back up higher and higher into the system until we isolated one pipe. So the results, again, significant reduction in flow. Again, those isolated high flows remained. And the large source was identified. It was 5 broken laterals. So what had happened is the service connection disconnected from the sewer. It would rain, groundwater would come up, and these open areas would dewater the area for about a day and a half to 2.5 days after a rainfall. So here's another money shot. So what you see is this is a service connection that's sheared away. You can't see it, but this is what it did after rainfall, and there were 5 of these. It's a 4-inch pipe flowing full. You may say, well, there's nothing coming from there, David. Well, it's actually, all you see is the entrained air. That's a solid column of water. So in conjunction with city staff, we went back and addressed all of these. I don't know how much of that we want to watch. But, so I apologize for this graphic, but these are the days. These scales are millimeters of rain. So we've got, this was pre-retrofit, so pre-repairs. This is post. So these 2 rainfall events are reasonably similar. Actually, the post one is more rainfall. So this is the liters per second. This is what happened when it rained. So your base flow is about 1 liters per second. You got up to about 10, sometimes 12 liters per second. So we basically cut it in half the first time around prior to fixing the service connection issue. Now, after we'd fixed those 5 service connections, forgive me, this graphic, I apologize, it's a little noisy, but this is rainfall here. We're at the point now where you can't monitor the inflow in that sewer, meaning it's tight. There's no response to rainfall. And I guess this is the money shot. I'm going to throw these numbers out, but what you save is largely dependent on how much it rains, and I'm pretty good, but I can't reasonably predict how much it's going to rain next year. On average, you get about a meter of precipitation that's frozen in liquid precipitation in a year. So the pre-repair inflow and infiltration volume is about 180,000 cubic meters. We applied a uniform wastewater treatment rate to that, which results in $125,000. Post-repair, you're down to about 9,900. So annual savings predicated upon some, it raining the same next year would be in the region of $115,000. If we could achieve that citywide, if we continue the program, you'll be up around that $1 million. And how practical that is, we won't know that until we see the other areas. One saving that's not in here, one of the previous reports recommended a 2,400 cubic meter storage tank for this area, for the arena area. That would have cost you in excess of $4 million. That's no longer required. So the payback, if you have a total cost of $615,000 approximately, you should see that back, provided all things stay equal and it rains, in approximately 5 years. I will say that you've deferred or negated the need for the storage tank, as well as, really, this is a little bit misleading in that you funded this project with 50 cent dollars. 50 cents out of every dollar was contributed by the Niagara Region CSO program. So phase 2, based on the initial successes, is the Omer area. It's 900 properties. Initial results show actually about 90 sump pump connections, pretty significant. There's some additional investigation required here. The real challenge here is a very flat area. You can't simply pop someone's sump pump connection out, put it through the wall and discharge it. You can cause freezing problems. You can cause sidewalk problems. You can cause problems to your neighbors. So there's more of a concerted effort here to look at where you can put all this flow resulting from the sump pumps without negatively impacting anybody. And I thank you for your attention. I'll take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Well done. Members of council, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Bodner?
Thank you very much. Through you to, well, maybe Mr. Hanson, but where did the money come from to fund this?
Mr. Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Each year in the budget process, we put aside a capital allocation, recommend the council that we spend $200,000 as part of the capital allocation. Those funds are generated through the rate, through the wastewater rate, and we've been very fortunate through the region CSO funds to have matching dollars in both Arena and Omer. The initial CSO program provided funding on both the private side and the public side. Unfortunately, at the end of the Arena program, that policy changed. They now will only fund the public side. So any of the funds coming forward and being expended on Omer, we have to pay 100% on the private side. So we're working forward on that with the region to see if we can get some leeway in that policy and try to get some additional funding available.
Okay, go ahead.
So just to confirm, these don't come out of general funds. This comes out of the sewer fund that's generated by the rates.
Sewer water rates.
Sewer water rates, yeah. Okay, I just say that because some people in the rural area may look and say, boy, that's a lot of money to spend on that, right? But they're not paying for it. It's simply the people that contribute to the sewer and water. So, okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments? Just a few questions, either to you, Mr. Water, or to Mr. Hanson. You showed those areas where the water was coming in. What was the age of that infrastructure?
Mr. Mayor, that particular system was built around 1975. We found through the CCTV and the inspections we did that generally the pipe itself was very structurally sound. These are just flaws in the joints of the AC pipe that's there, and some of the joints had opened up or cracked. But on the whole, it's a very sound system, and it's a good candidate for this type of repair, the grouting and the joint sealing within the system.
And it wouldn't be feasible to actually go into infrastructure of that age and just simply line it anyway, whether we recognize it or not?
Mr. Mayor, it's really not, it wouldn't be money well spent. Where the best bang for the buck right here was to really tackle, find and fix immediately, as we've done on this project, is to tackle the problem areas like those leaking laterals. The dilemma going forward into Omer is we found 90 to date sump pump redirects that have to go in, and these are going to average somewhere between $2,500 to $3,500 per redirect. And as I stated to Councillor Bodner, there's no funding available for that, so this is on our ticket. So that's going to be the challenge. When we get up around 100 laterals at $3,500 per lateral, then the money becomes a real challenge. There's a nice payback on it, but we still have to be able to find the funds to do these redirect. And the ancillary problem with that, as you get into Omer and Wallace and a couple of these other streets where we don't have designed storm sewers, we have to find an outlet for this stuff as we redirect it. And it's no longer into the sanitary sewer pipe. And that's a problem in itself.
Okay, thank you. And finally, when it comes to snow removal, you mentioned the fact that ice and snow contribute to the overall problem. Would it be beneficial if we actually, I know we remove a lot of snow in the downtown core, but would it be beneficial if we removed more snow within the municipality to areas of which then it wouldn't infiltrate our infrastructure?
Mr. Mayor, with the arena system the way it is, and it's very tight, we're very certain that we have no catch basins connected to the system. We're not getting the leakage from the streets directly into the system, so that wouldn't be a large factor in doing it once you have a tight system. But you're correct in the assumption that when you go into an area, and if you had direct connections into the sanitary sewer, that would be an issue, and the direct runoff would be going into the pipes in certain areas.
Okay, great. Any further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments to you, Mr. Watt? Anything else? Great job. I do have to say to yourself, your company, as well as to Mr. Hanson, especially you and your crew, job well done. A lot of money is being saved here, and it's not always the front page news of any media that we're saving a whole bunch of money on our water wastewater. But I have to say that sometimes it should be, especially when you're saving the amount of money that we're now recognizing. So, Ron, I know how hard you've worked on this with your team, so job well done. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, it's a perfect opportunity to really thank Associated Engineering for really thinking outside the box on this particular type of project. I think Dave can relate maybe one more story to you. Some of the initiatives that have been done here with regards to public information, the sewer use bylaw, and the approach to go on private property and fix these things as we go in, it's a fairly unique approach. And I know Associated Engineering is looking at this from an asset management point of view. They work right across Canada, all kinds of, in all the provinces and a lot of different municipalities with different type of problems. But this is a program, this pilot program going forward is something that can pretty much be used as a template for other municipalities all over Canada that have a similar type problem. And I know Dave can speak to this as their asset management sort of guru at Associated Engineering, and I know it's something that's going to be used in a lot of the other applications.
Mr. Watt?
I guess two things of significance. Sue Noble here presented the results of this program, not the final results, but the methodology to the Canadian Association for Water Quality annual conference at the Canadian Centre for Inland Waters. That's the building just below, Environment Canada building, just below the Burlington Skyway. The other issue is that, I said there's not a municipality in the region that doesn't struggle with it. There's not a municipality in Canada that doesn't struggle with this. So Sue and I attended our biannual tech share in Vancouver 3 weeks ago, and this was selected, this project, as one of the, Sue actually presented on it to 250 of our infrastructure practitioners. And they range from the sort of Nanaimo to Niagara Falls and all points in between. So this project, or the lessons learned, are being applied in several areas. I think one of them is Fort McMurray, in fact, which is in the news a whole lot. But they're struggling with optimizing their infrastructure, as are a number of other communities. So there is a certain amount of technology transfer at play here, as Ron's alluded to.
Well, Mr. Howe, go ahead. Go ahead.
Worship, there is one other thing that is unsung that needs to be said, and Mr. Hanson and Mr. Hoopanen pointed out to me when we were reviewing the report. That's the fact that with the savings that accrue to the municipalities, the direct cost savings over time will be realized. And for us, it's a payback of about 3 years based on our 50-cent dollars and the region. But it has a major implication in that some of the capital works identified currently in capital budgets of the regional municipality of Niagara can be reconsidered because there may not be a requirement to increase pumps and pump sizes. There's a whole capital component here that really isn't reflected here that will have some major impact at the regional level. One of the things that was spoken about is that the region doesn't contribute now to the private side. It doesn't share in the reduction or the disconnection of sump pumps and things. But if there is a savings on the capital side that has not yet been recognized, I'm going to suggest the region had better take a look at what impact this has on the cleaning side, because it has a major capital component.
We're sitting too close to each other. I just checked those points out. Thanks, Bob. But yeah, I think that's bang on, and I think Councillor Bodner was alluding to it earlier as well, is the fact that it's great, and I do want to express my appreciation to the region, going back to 2006 and 7 for really okaying those 50-cent dollars, but more so for the private side as well as the public side. And I would ask members of council or a member of council to put forward a resolution this evening, 2 resolutions, one for leave and one for a resolution, to go back to the region and ask them to reconsider that private side investment. And the reason why I say that is for the exact reasons that Mr. Howe just alluded to, that it does, in fact, address the capital, I'll call it the capital deficit, the infrastructure deficit that the region right now is recognizing because of this very problem when it comes to water, wastewater. And Bob's right. You know, the more that we can get off the system, and Mr. Watt alluded to earlier, the more savings it is to not have to build tanks or not have to build an expanded system, whether it be pumping stations, whether it be just added infrastructure in the overall trunk system and leading to our distribution system. So I think it makes total sense for us to do 2 things this evening, is to send a resolution to the region asking, and I'll ask Ron to wordsmith it, but asking for them to reconsider the private section of the actual investment for 50-cent dollars, and with that add in the methodology that Associated has used as a pilot here in Port Colborne, and hopefully it can be used across the entire region of Niagara, because although it may not be our municipality, it's still our taxpayer. And at the end of the day, the more we can defer from the capital dollars that would otherwise have to go into the system, which, by the way, are reflected in the taxes that are paid at the regional level, then the better it is for everyone throughout the entire region of Niagara. So I would recommend, or I would urge a member of council to put that forward as a recommendation this evening, and we can pass it on to the region, and both David and I can go down there and I won't say fight that battle, but make that case down at the region. Councillor Bodner?
I'd be happy to put that forward. I don't think it's needs a lot of explanation to the region. It's pretty Absolutely. Dollars and cents, right?
Exactly.
It's not something you got to sell. It's something that just has to be presented, and and hopefully they get on board and realize the savings to them.
Exactly.
So I'll make that motion, and like you say, maybe Ron can put the right words to it.
Okay, if I can have leave first. Yeah. Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Bodner is putting a motion forward. Councillor Demeray seconding it. Madam Clerk, you were leaning over for something? You want to dispense with the first motion first? Okay. So we do have a motion on the floor from Councillor Kenny. That was moved earlier. I'll come back to your motion in a second, Councillor Bodner. Are there any questions or comments to that motion? Yes. The one that number 12. Okay. With no questions or comments. Ron, any comments? No? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. To Councillor Bodner's motion. Are there any comments or questions? Clarification from staff? Needed? Fine. Nothing further? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Mr. Watt, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your presentation and your patience this evening. Ron, once again, thank you, and thank you to your team. Great job. Wonderful job. Members of council, we're now going to move on to item 13. If I can have a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. That the Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report Number 2011-19, Subject Update Report on the Omer Pumping Station Catchment Area Extraneous Flow Reduction Program be approved, recommending that the update report on the Omer Pumping Station Extraneous Flow Reduction Program be received for information. Hopefully with comments from Ron.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Desmarais. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attached to our report tonight, there's a progress report. The Omer area, as we've stated, is about twice the size of Arena, where we realized some significant cost savings on an annual basis. The progress report attached here gives council a nice update on where we are with the program. We're following the same template that was used in Arena, trying to get in as many homes as possible, doing an intensive public relations, public information process through it, and we've identified over 90 direct sump pump connections. So moving forward with this, we're going to continue on. And in addition to this stage of the process, we're looking now beyond Omer. If the funding is going to be there, going on 5 years, 10 years in the future, we're looking at areas like Nickel Street, where we know we have a high level of connection within the system, and we've actually got our flow monitors. I don't know if we mentioned it to council tonight, but the city actually purchased new flow monitors to complement this program, to do pre and post monitoring of the systems. So we have the monitors out there. We've looked at the Sugarloaf area. We've looked at the Nickel Street area, and we're trying to put together a program going in the future for the funding program. We have our current 2012 funding application for the CSO program, and we're going to put together a proposal in the next few weeks to go to the region for additional funding. I think the motion tonight is very timely. We've had many discussions with the region in terms of funding the private side. It's a very important component for us to be able to tackle this problem. We found in past studies, past work, that if we stay strictly on the public side, we're not going to achieve the results we want. We have to go full bore to the entire system. So that's the direction we're moving in now. And as I said, this particular report in summary gives you a good point on where we are with the Omer area. So we're going to keep working ahead in 2012 on Omer to try to complete that project and recoup as much money as possible on the treatment side.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ron. Ron, you noted earlier in our discussions on item 12 that there were no storm sewers in these areas. Will that be addressed at the same time? Because, like you said, there has to be a place for the water to go. And since Wallace and Omer and Oast do not have storm sewers, is that going to be addressed as well?
Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Mayor, through you, that's a very good question. It's very intuitive because, in fact, that's what we're doing. We applied for some funding, some additional funding that was available out there for various types of studies relating to water resources. And in doing that, we applied to the region and got funding for a storm sewer study to determine where those outlets are. What is the condition of the existing storm sewer system, not in Bartok and that, because we know we have design systems, and actually Associated has plotted, through the GIS system, has plotted all the existing storm sewers within the Omer area. As well, we've done surveys on Wallace, Omer, Borden, these areas that don't have design systems, but we're determining what the condition of the pipes are and where the outlets are, and that's all being rolled in as part of the Omer study. So we're hoping to determine in each case, in each street by section, where we have a reasonable outlet. And if we don't have one, we're going to have to come back to council and say, this is a priority for storm sewer. This is where we have to provide these outlets to redirect the water from the sump pump. So, in fact, Councillor Kenny, that's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Further questions or comments, members? With none, and of course, hence the motion earlier with respect to the private side. Hopefully we can get some savings. And Ron, when we get that written up for the region, let us write and ensure that we articulate the savings from the capital side, so that way members of council will understand exactly the payback with respect to investing on the private side of the system.
Mr. Mayor, just one more point maybe we didn't mention. As part of the MOE's mandate that we received in 2006, 2007, we were required to do this type of work to cut out the CSOs and the extraneous flows. The plan going forward here right now with ARENA is that we're going to take these studies. It's quite an extensive study, about that thick. The study will go to the MOE. We'll be going to the regional staff. We've already given regional staff a heads up that the study's done and is coming forward. So those will be going forward within the next week or so. So everybody will be advised at both levels of where we are with this study. And we're hoping it's going to be a very positive response to it.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Henson. And once again, well done. Members of council, any further questions or comments? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 3. Councillor Bodner.
Mr. Mayor, the Department of Planning and Development, report number 2011-86, subject remuneration of Committee of Adjustment members, be approved recommending, subject to Council's repealing bylaw 50-20-7507 through Planning and Development Report 2011-72 that Council approve the bylaw attached hereto as Appendix A to establish remuneration of Committee of Adjustment members.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? Councillor Bodner.
I brought that up for some of the members of council that had a conflict, but I think it's important to notice that, to note to the public that this very large increase that we're giving them equates to $5 a member increase. So just so somebody doesn't think we're throwing money away again, this is a Committee of Adjustment that does a very good job for the city, and the total increase is $5 per member.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Councillor Bider, item 4.
That the Department of Planning and Development report number 2011-83, subject Humberson Shoe Park, surplus land, be approved recommending that the Council of the City of Port Colborne hereby declare part of Lot 5 and 6 on Plan 763, being Part 1 and 2 on Plan 59R-14504, as illustrated on the attached hereto, as surplus to the city's needs, and 2, that Council engage the services of Royal LePage to sell the property.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Butters, questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move on to item 7 with respect to Community and Corporate Services. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Services Division Report number 2011-30, schedule of rates for Community Services 2012 be approved, recommending 1, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approves the schedule of rates for the following facilities as per the attached appendices for the 2012 season, commencing January 1st, 2012. A, Westside Arena as listed in Appendix A. B, Centennial Pool as listed in Appendix B. C, Roselawn Center as listed in Appendix C. D, Nickel Beach as listed in Appendix D. 2, that the appropriate facility rate bylaws be presented to Council for approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading the report, under staff comments and discussions, you come to the line where it says that staff met with the president of Port Colborne Minor Hockey Association to discuss a $5 increase in minor hockey rates, and that Minor Hockey Association has agreed to the $5 rate increase and recognizes the need to adjust to accommodate to the new facility. And I just wondered if is it a past practice that we ask our users if they agree with the rate increase that we've proposed?
Mr. Meekins?
Certainly, we always talk to the groups that don't always agree to the price increase. I've contacted to the hockey club and let him know what his increase is. It's not a good one, but that's so important since staff report. It works out well if what we're planning to increase is accepted by the user groups and certain things. These are always, I like them all the time because it's planning for their rates of use for next year too.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess part of the reason I asked the question, we're going into the new arena, and right now, our subsidy of the three aging two, well, I guess now because one of them's gone. But in past years, we've had a deficit in operating of approximately between $600,000 and $700,000, which has been subsidized through the levy, through taxpayers, and as we move towards the new center, we're increasing rates to get people to get used to. Cost will go up to operate the new facility. I think in the CAO's report of 2010, which we discussed at budget last week, that he forwarded to all of us, I think there's an identified increase in cost anywhere from $260,000 and above. It says here in the report as well that to generate additional income in support of adjustments towards status quo subsidy for operation. And I just wonder, should we ask ourselves, are we satisfied with the status quo of the taxpayer contributing between $600,000 and $700,000 of their money into the operation of the facilities? When we look at all of the reports tonight that we're talking about, there's a lot of bylaws that we're passing with respect to departments increasing their fees to user fees covering staff time. And yet this report says that we should stick with status quo and just keep the subsidy at between $600,000 and $700,000 a year. I guess my question is, why are we supportive of that? Why are we just sitting back saying, yeah, okay, I can understand. We've paid $600,000 or $700,000 a year in a subsidy. I'm happy with that. I would like to know comments from staff. Why can't we move the rates to reduce that subsidy? And especially going into the new facility where it's been identified that there will be or should be an increase in cost in running it, have we covered the cost of the increased costs? Are we getting there? How much higher do we have to be with respect of rates of ice time rental? I noticed we didn't move on the pool rates at all. Basically, it was just on the ice rates. How much do we have to increase the rates further to accommodate the increase in usage or operating costs for the new arena? And do we or are we satisfied with the taxpayer subsidy of $600,000 plus? And do we want to increase rates to reduce that subsidy level?
Okay, I just want to be clear here. This report's not talking about the new health and wellness center, is it not? It's actually talking about the actual existing facilities? Yes. So let's stick to that discussion. Okay. Mr. Heil?
Your Worship, the rates here, if you recall in my report 2010 too, is that there was a need to increase the rates to make them comparable with other municipalities and other facilities. So in that rate alone, with no changes in building, the increase in rate is a movement directly to help reduce some of that subsidy. That's the intention eventually. Regardless of what facility, the rates here were low. And it's just a matter of trying to manage our revenue.
Mr. Sinez, any comments? Mr. Makins, any comments? None? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess through you to Peter or to the CAO. We don't have the fiscal year end of 2010 yet, and I just wondered if you could tell me what the subsidy was, if we even know, from 2010 for the arenas and the pool. I think the last thing we have, I don't even know if we have 2009 to compare. As we go forward, it would be nice to know where we were and what we should be working towards. As we come to the budget, how how close are we to getting the financials from 2010?
Mr. Sinez?
Mr. Mayor, as far as 2010, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can't remember what those numbers would be, but the subsidy that is on the tax levy, I would mention to say it would be fairly close to between the $600,000 and $700,000.
That's the net.
The net amount. Right. The net amount between the pool and the two arenas. You know, as much as we do increase revenues, we also have an increase in our operating costs too. So I would say we're probably in around that area. As far as the 2010 financial statements, the auditors are finishing up just now. Actually, they're going to be back in the end of this week just to finalize a few things and then doing the draft financial statements. And I was hoping to have them for the December 12th, but I don't believe that they'll have them ready for the December 12th. So it'll be probably one of the meetings in January that they'll be coming forward.
Okay. I have Councillor Desmarais, Bodner, Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for everyone viewing through Cogeco Land, I think it's important to note that there are no proposed changes to members of the public using the arenas or the pools for public skating or public swimming. It's very important that we're keeping that affordable.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Elliott's statement, but I think it might be just a little bit premature as we don't really have a good handle on what we may be recouping from the new Health and Wellness Center. And while I think Council should have a statement that they certainly want to reduce that subsidy, that until we really see who's going to run it, whether we're going to run it or somebody else, or or what is that deficit after the first year, it may kind of fix itself, or it may be the other way. So we really don't know yet. But certainly I think the question needs to be asked, and I'm not just sure whether it can be answered this early in the process.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think it always has been fair debate when we're trying to establish a schedule of rates and fees for the West Side Arena, the East Side Arena, Centennial Pool, Roselawn, Nickel Beach, etc. It always has been a level of debate on how much subsidy we actually provide. This goes back to the 90s, in the early 90s when I first got on council, Councillor Kenny, when we talked about this over at the Vimy School Center, which is no longer there. Councillor Doucette, you remember that. But I think it all boils down to the question. The question is, does the taxpayer pay for it through a subsidy, or does the user pay for it through user fees? It's either or. There's no in between. It's one or the other. And if the subsidy is going to go down, the user fees are going to go up. If the subsidy stays the same, it stays the same, and vice versa. The subsidy goes up, user fees go down. But it's always the ongoing debate. And I think we're netting out right now at about $780 with those three facilities, and give or take. And the intent is to bring that down, but we also have to take into consideration in a new center the more amenities that are available. So although it may be cheaper as a net subsidy for each individual component of the facility, overall with the add-ons, there's no question that might be more, but hence the reason why we're trying to bring more revenue in with the programming that we're going to bring into the facility. So it's a business, and at the end of the day, the business case is there, and hopefully we can meet the mandate of that case. So, but I think Councillor Elliott brings up a great point, and I think it's going to be up to this council this year, going into budget, but more so next year, and probably more importantly even the year after, once we're in that home for a year and recognize what the actual costs are, where this council is going to have to come to grips with what direction you want to take, whether it's a subsidy or whether it's in fact user fees. We all have our opinions on that. It's no use getting into those opinions today. We'll have plenty of time to get into those opinions, and of course I'm sure members of the public will have their opinions as well to feed to us. So I'm sure we all look forward to that debate. So with that said, are there any further questions or comments to this bylaw? Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was hoping to get asked for first because I really felt that because we don't have enough information yet. I know Councillor Steele couldn't be here tonight, but him and I had a chat in regards to these rates and everything, especially in regards to the hockey. He has a report coming forward that he did not have available tonight, how that would be handled. and really asked if this could be deferred to our next meeting. We still have a budget
Okay,
meeting.
stop there.
Can we defer?
Before I can't take your deferral. Okay, so the member has asked for deferral.
Just because we
Do I
don't
have a
have.
seconder to that, please? Councillor Elliott, and that's deferred until the next meeting?
Correct.
Okay, pardon me? The 12th, okay.
12th, yeah.
Members of council, it's non-debatable. All those in favor for the deferral? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay. Opposed? None. That will be passed. We'll defer it until the 12th. Thank you. Peter, if we can we have our budget meeting on the 5th as well, do we not? If we can have a bit of discussion on this as well during our budget meeting, just maybe show some of the information with respect to what Dave was talking about with the subsidies, the actual number. That's the second time that's been asked, what that net number is, that net subsidy is. And I keep throwing out 780. The CAO beside me kind of cringes. So I'm not sure if I'm on or if I'm off. So let's get that number. Is it a little high? Okay, I thought it was 780. But let's confirm that, and that way we have that number. So when we're discussing it, we're more accurate. Thank you, Peter. Okay, with that being deferred, we'll now move on to item 8. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Community Services, report number 2011-31, subject municipal parks, bylaw and permit fees be approved, recommending 1, that council amend parks bylaw 5503/100/10 by removing the existing Schedule C and replacing it with the new Schedule C attached to this report. Number 2, that the appropriate parks bylaw be amended.
Thank you, Councillor Butters. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question through you to Mr. Makins. On page 81, it talks about the park pavilion rental going 2011 at $20 to 2012 to $40. I just wondered why that amount is doubled, because it seems that a lot of times it's families that rent the pavilion for family reunions, family picnics. So I just wondered why that was doubled.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Makins.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. We actually found that the $20 fee was actually quite low and hadn't been changed in a number of years. We're just trying to recoup a little bit more of the staff cost, and it is fairly cost just to fill out the permit and then to have the park staff prepare the pavilion, make sure it's ready for the use or whatever. It is a very popular item, and so we may have a few complaints, but it's still worth it. That's a full day in the park or whatever, so it's still affordable.
Okay, go ahead.
Was there any kind of canvassing other municipalities that would have similar pavilions and what they rent theirs for?
Mr. Makins.
To compare?
Certainly. We did check. The City of Hamilton has one that it's $75 is what they charge for a day rental or whatever at the Dundas Driving Park or whatever. So we're still, almost half of the fee is there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor.
I'm really not comfortable with $40. I think it's too big of a leap in 1 year. I think it would be better if it was, raise some this year and then raise some more next year. I think to double it in 1 year is excessive. So I'm not going to support that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments to the recommendation? Councillor Bodner.
Just a thought, if Councillor Butters isn't going to support that, does it need to be, can we change that now and just, or do we have to defeat it?
Well, the clerk's kicking me already. So I'd prefer to defeat it and then come back with a new motion. Okay. Ouch. Members of council, any further questions or comments? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? That would be last. Councillor Butters.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we change the park pavilion rental to $30. And the rest of the report is fine.
Do I have a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Danch. This is really putting some budget stress on staff. Can I ask council? Councillor Butters has got a motion right now to bring it down to $30. Is that what you said? $30 from 20 to 30. Would you be amenable to actually deferring this to budget instead of voting on it tonight, so that way you can see the implications of that change in budget? I'm throwing that out to you as the chair of this meeting, I can't make that motion, but I'll throw it out to you for your thought to defer to budget. Because again, every cent that we're dealing with right now has an implication on budget. And I'd like you to have the full picture during the budget deliberations than just simply a motion in front of you. Councillor Bodner?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Makins, do you have an idea how many rentals we have on that?
Mr. Makins?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we're just speaking that I can pull that tomorrow. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I believe it's in probably about 50 at least. So, but I'll get the exact number tomorrow. We have all the records.
Okay. Further questions or comments to the motion? It has been moved and seconded. That's up to you guys. Okay. No further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Item number 9, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Community and Corporate Services report number 211-49, subject user fees for corporate services 2012, be approved recommending that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approve the user fees for services for corporate services, that the attached bylaw be adopted by Council.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Elliott, questions or comments? Councillor Doucette?
Mr. Sinez asked for...
Mr. Sinez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only change on this that I just wanted to bring to Council's attention is on the schedule we do have a rate for compliance letters of $90, and that compliance letter fee is already in the planning report that's passed, and it was $115.
Great,
so
thank you.
we're looking to remove that because it's already on a different schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Sinez. Everybody's fine with that? No further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. Item 10, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Community and Corporate Services report number 2011-50, subject 2012 borrowing bylaw, Health and Wellness Center be approved, recommending that the council adopt a bylaw to authorize temporary borrowing of up to $2 million as a construction loan for the Health and Wellness Center for bridge financing.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Bodner, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Peter, just 2 quick questions. It says currently funding is being provided through the established reserve fund and a note payable from PC Hydro. How much the reserve fund is funded with how much money, and what reserve fund is it?
Mr. Sinez.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The Community Center Reserve Fund, approximately around $4 million, and then the note payable that will be coming due at the end of this end of December, which is $2.2 million.
Councillor.
Thank you. And then just a second question on the flow chart on page 97, almost to the end. It says that fundraising will be responsible for $3,366,116. And I remember seeing Councillor Steele and the mayor's picture in the paper with the bricks for the fundraising. Obviously, it's an ambitious target for the next year. Can you comment about how we are doing on fundraising? I've never heard anybody say where we are and how we're doing.
No, you can't. That's subject to discussions that we're going to go into closed session for this evening.
On one end, no, we can't, but we are working on a number of different leads that, in addition to the fundraising campaigns of the bricks, and we have a seat program coming out this month also.
Good answer. Just it's tough to answer because we do. I can say this, Councillor, we will be making an announcement on December 8th with respect to fundraising, and that's as far as I can go right now. The rest should be notified this evening in closed session, and that's with all due respect to another entity. Any further questions or comments? That's enough out of you, Bodner. All All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Item 11, Councillor Dench.
That the Department of Community and Corporate Services Division, report number 2011-53, subject 2012 rate schedule for Sugarloaf Marina Public Boat Launch, Sugarloaf Pavilion be approved, recommending that the Council of the City of Port Colborne approves the schedule of rates for the 2012 season as attached in Schedule 1 to 6, that the rates be reviewed on an annual basis by staff with an updated report to Council, that the City Clerk prepare the appropriate bylaw for the new rates to be approved by the Council and executed by the Mayor and the City Clerk.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that, please? Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? Councillor Dench.
I know we had a trying year at the marina, and looking at what we've got going on there and looking at the rates, and they look pretty decent, and we're trying to get our boater buddies back and fill that marina. One of the things I was looking at, and I talked to a friend of mine there, the public launch, $15 to put your boat in. I know we have a guy down there that looks after things and some of the organized confusion that goes on, but they do have these nice little boxes that don't take holidays, don't take breaks, and you know, the people would go down, insert their money into these boxes. The tag goes on your vehicle. If you don't buy a tag, the bylaw officer comes by, tickets your vehicle. Maybe there's some cost savings there that could be you know, put back into our marina and whatnot. And secondly, I hope that this year we can look after getting some of the duck crap off the dock a little bit more regularly, and get some of the grass and whatnot off the docks to make these boaters a little bit happier than they were in the previous season. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a great point, actually. Mr. Sinez or Mr. Howe, you want to comment on that?
Your Worship, two things. Number one, we don't have to rely on anybody in 2012 to cut our grass in the water, as Council invested in some piece of equipment that is going to do the job, and we found it works better than other material in previous years. That's one issue. Secondly, we are discussing, and I've discussed it with the Director of Corporate Services, about perhaps an unmanned parking meter type thing at the launch that would in fact provide an opportunity. We were reviewing again today, all the directors going through budgets again, trying to eke out $1 or $2 here and there. One of the areas that we discussed was parking meters, for example, in all the parking areas in the city, because it's you know, you're charging a nickel right now and a dime, and parking meters are one. Our old meters are getting old, and there's a report that's being prepared right now that hopefully will come to Council on December the 12th at that meeting, and we may, or we hope to be able to provide Council with a report on a similar device of some sort, or at least the option for the launch. Save some money and hopefully make some money.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Questions or comments? I have Councillor Elliott and Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the public boat launch, we don't charge to use it after, and I'm throwing it out there.
September 1st.
No. Hold on. Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, we didn't charge it this year, and that was a mistake. Right now, there's supposed to be a charge all the time. In our estimates and our costs we were looking at, it actually cost us more to collect it in September and October. This year was exceptional. You know, everybody's coming here. If you have to look at the weather, unlike other years, we probably wouldn't have made money this year. And the anticipation in, as discussed, looking at some kind of a mechanized way to collect for the launch of boats will be all season and all weather. So hopefully we won't run into a difficulty that we have in the past of paying more to collect it, and then this year not doing it and finding that we could have probably made more money. But one of the things that we did find is that most of the boaters that come in September and October, they have a season's pass. That there's not the millions of dollars that everybody thinks that there is there. 75% of those people have season's passes for launch.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask about that because there were some weekends in October, first part of November, you go down Saturday, Sunday, and there's like 100 cars around. And it's like, boy, we don't even have anybody collecting. And as we're looking for sources of revenue, I guess when you read the report and you see, and I'm not a boater, so I have no idea how this fares for them. But when we're just going to a flat fee, and it says, you know, we're trying to up our occupancy to generate more revenue by actually lowering the rates. And I mean, it sounds good in principle. I'm just wondering, like, is it feasible to actually generate? We're looking at an extra $16,000 in revenue by actually lowering the rates and going to a flat fee. I mean, if we don't hit that $16,000 target, where does that leave the marina?
Mr. Snez.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's definitely a different concept, different way of approaching things, and something that we discussed with the marina manager and the assistant manager, and they believe that, you know, based on some of, you know, what happened in 2011 and all that, and looked at, okay, how can we do things a little differently and try to gain people back and increase that occupancy for the marina. One of the ways was, you know, let's look at lowering that cost a bit and see if we can draw more people, especially people that may be paying for the boat ramp, $15 a day type of thing. It might be cheaper for them to actually put their boat in there, leave it in there, and they can come and go as they please type of thing. So they're trying to entice the boaters to come in, hopefully at a little cheaper cost, and hopefully we're looking at trying to increase that occupancy. Obviously, you know, can we make the 25? We're hoping, definitely, and there's some optimism there. And if we don't, then we got to reduce our expenditures within the budget to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Sinez. Councillor Bodner?
I guess I had the same concern that Councillor Elliott just expressed about reducing the rate. Kind of reminds me of like all the golf courses to reduce their, you know, their rates to try to get people in, and you know, they're still going bankrupt. But I guess I'd be willing to give it a year, because this is only for 2012, and just see how that works out. But I don't know that I'm sold on it totally. But I don't know the marina business, so you know, I'll bow to the marina manager and the assistant manager on that one. On the before we kick the kid off the dock into the water and put in a parking meter, do they do anything else? Do they referee? Do they line people up to put their boats in? Is it going to be a free-for-all there without somebody in charge? Just, you know, just a question.
Mr. Sinez.
Through Mr. Mayor, the whole idea of having the boat ramp attendant there is basically to collect fees. That person's job really isn't there to referee or help them boaters get in. You know, basically they should be doing it on their own. The fact that he is there, yes, he does help periodically, you know, some boaters that may need some help. But that's not really what the duty of that person being there. There's a little kiosk there for that individual to stay out of the weather and that type of thing. But pretty much just there to collect the fees of the boat ramp and to ensure that people are paying or have that pass that they've actually paid to go into it, the boat ramp. But basically not there to referee.
Thank you. Councillor?
Geez, I guess if I was going to offer really good customer service at a boat ramp, I'd like somebody there to actually represent the city and kind of, I don't know, I guess I'll wrestle with this. Are we going to, this isn't decided in this report tonight, right? No, but I think we need to have that discussion to see whether that's a wise move. So I'll leave that for another day.
Well, and I think that's a good point, Councillor Bodner. I was in Picton actually this summer, and I was very impressed with the young lady that was working at the ramp down there. She came out and she was helping actually a fellow that was having a hard time getting his boat lined up on his trailer. We ended up helping out as well, but just her being out there and the customer service she was providing, just attempting to do what she was attempting to do, was pretty impressive. So I think that goes a long way in terms of the cost that it ultimately costs the municipality. So. Members of council, any further questions or comments? With none, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to item 13. Councillor Kenny. I'm sorry, item, yeah, you're right, we did 12 and 13, eh? There we go. Number 16, we have Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report Number 2011-52, subject, contract 2011-36, supply of 1 bulk water filling station, be approved recommending, A, that the Council of the City of Port Colborne award tender 2011-36 to Municipal Solutions of St. Albert, Alberta for option 1A, large bulk water station, and for the software and components upgrade to the Elm Street bulk water filling station for project 2011-36, supply of 1 bulk water filling station for the total bid price of $103,981.60 plus applicable taxes. And further, that a contract by law whereby the city enters into a contract agreement with the supplier be prepared, and B, that the funding for tender 2011-36 be financed under account 3595-33437-3328.
Thank you, Councillor. From a seconder to that, please. Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you very much. This was, I'm glad to see that that the bulk water station that's going in is the one that the people that own the trucks were asking for, with the top fill and bottom fill option on there. And I'd also like to ask, I see that it's fairly sophisticated in that, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Hansen, will this be a new system that the water haulers come and just simply put a card into, or an upgraded version of the one we have?
Mr. Hansen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The system will be upgraded. It's a new system. It'll still have the automated access, a keypad approach to it. The benefit of this particular station is we're now going to have, both with this one and the upgraded Elm Street, we'll have remote access. So we're actually going to be able to take the readings, download those remotely, and actually do the billings remotely without having to go out and manually record all the readings. So definitely an enhancement to the system, but fairly invisible to the end users themselves as far as access.
Thank you, Mr. Hansen. Councillor, that's fine. Further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That'll be carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to item 18. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Department of Economic Development, Tourism and Marketing, report number 2011-08, subject, Tourism Association update, be approved recommending 1, that the report on possible tourism association and destination marketing potential and strategies be received for information, and 2, that staff be directed to continue to explore the development of a steering committee of interested South Coast municipalities and tourism stakeholders.
Thank you, Councillor. Have a second to that, please. Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I see Mr. Thompson coming walking in, which is good because we haven't seen him in a while.
Been on vacation.
Hey, he's been quiet.
Yeah.
He's on vacation. How come he doesn't have a tan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I guess congratulations are in order to Stephen and his department. Because I attended the very first meeting on September the 7th at Roselawn when this was kind of floated out. And I guess you could call me a skeptic, because when I heard that we were going to start the South Coast Tourism Association, and to see if anybody had any interest in it, I guess when you're starting something new, you're always a little skeptical of how many people will come and participate and show any interest at all. And believe me, I was overwhelmed when I walked into the room at Roselawn and saw that it was full. We must have had, I'm going to say, 75 to 100 people there. Mayor was there and made a presentation. A few of the other councillors were there as well. I thought the attendance was absolutely fantastic. The response from across the south coast of Niagara, Waynfleet, Port Colborne, Ridgeway, Fort Erie, Welland, City Councillor Forche from Welland was there.
which was good cross-representation of people. I know that subsequently after that meeting was held, there was another get-together, and then I believe, Mr. Mayor, you and the other mayors of some of the municipalities and the economic EDOs from some had a meeting as well. This is fantastic. I believe that that tourism is an avenue that we definitely have to go down and explore. I think with the interest that was shown on that original meeting, 100 people come out to something that is of great interest to them. Just shocked me that there was that much of an interest in it. And congratulations. And I know, Stephen, that there's a member of your staff that was instrumental in putting this together, who worked very, very hard to get all the members and all the interested parties out, legwork, phone calls, and things like that. So I just wondered if you could comment on where it is, where it's been left off, and where we're going to go from here.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Thompson, by the way, welcome back. It's great to have you. Are you still on vacation?
I'm here, but I'm not here. I'm on vacation this week, but this is my third and final week. But yes, indeed.
Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. And following on that, I must admit that the most recent meeting on this subject was led by the mayor, and the CIO was also in attendance. So I may defer to them on some of the details in terms of the current status. The next step really is a follow-up meeting. There were a few takeaways from the previous meeting that I'm referencing, and the mayor's office has been working very diligently trying to find a time that works for 5 mayors, 5 economic development directors, and 5 CIOs. And that is proving to be a challenge, getting the majority in the room. So the next step is a follow-up meeting. The timing is posing a bit of a challenge, given that it is a one-year project. So it is a project that was externally funded on a finite duration. So we are not as far along as we'd hoped in terms of getting the formal support from the other potential partners as we would have liked. It really is just a matter of timing, getting the right people in the room to be able to get it to that next stage.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was only funded for 1 year, and I'm assuming that we're talking about the staff that we had that started it. Is that
Mr. Thompson?
Okay to mention?
Over the past many years, we've been quite successful in getting funding in from Employment Ontario, and that funding has been used for a variety of different things in special events, in tourism, in economic development. The funding and other areas of the city as well. The funding is increasingly difficult to get for a number of reasons. First reason being they simply aren't funding as many projects, and the project durations have been cut in half. And also, we've been back to that well an awful lot of times. As much as they may like us, it's really difficult for them to keep funding projects. Projects are finite in duration. They have a maximum, previously they had a maximum of a 12-month funding period. Now they have a maximum of a 6-month funding period. They can't budge from that. So they can't add a 7th month. They couldn't have added a 13th month, that sort of thing. So it had a finite timeline to it, and it was funded as a one-time initiative. So we definitely we wouldn't be successful in knocking on the door and say, hey, we need a bit more help next year to do the same thing. So it is going to have to be looked at in another way. Hopefully we can get it to that stage through the upcoming weeks where it's not going to be as onerous to try to keep that momentum moving.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. I'd hate to see us lose momentum in this. I'd hate to see it get stalled out and kind of go away. With the introduction of the RTO for Niagara, I think if we can get some support behind the South Coast Tourism Association, if you would put it that way, it would show a unified Southern Niagara, and we'd be able to promote ourselves to the RTO, show them that we're serious about tourism, tap into the synergies that they've got going. We were at, Councillor Bodner and I were at the original RTO meeting. So I think if we can keep this going and build on it, I think, I'd hate to see that funding loss stall this from our perspective, and that
maybe we can be a little creative and keep it going.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demeray, then Councillor Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, through you to Stephen. Stephen, first of all, I'd like to say that it's a great job being done. I usually hear complaints about the whole tourism idea from community members, but this year I've heard nothing but very positive comments. And people are actually understanding now that there is something to be said for tourism in Port Colborne. It's well said, and I'm glad that it's happening out there. I am concerned, though, because here we've had a year's worth of funding, and a project was laid out, and it doesn't look anywhere near completion. And I'm concerned that all this effort's gone in, and as Councillor Elliott said, it just may be left up in the air. Do we have solid, very concrete plans to pick it up and continue it on? And if not, is there something that you can recommend? Because I just hate to see this left. I understand the funding is gone and the position will be over, but is there something we can do?
And I can answer that. The intent here is as Councillor Elliott alluded to, was to bring partners on board, and I think we've seen those partners at that first meeting. We had a great turnout. We had representation from the Township of Wainfleet councillors, as well as people from the business community. The City of Welland, a councillor, Councillor Fortier was there, as well as some business individuals. Ridgeway, same thing, Fort Erie councillors, as well as business people, and of course here in the City of Port Colborne. The intent in today's way of doing business in government, in municipal government, is to in fact to be efficient and make those resources available, affordable. Excuse me. And therefore, the need to partner with other municipalities, including the region, is imminent. To therefore be able to put those service levels or levels of service in place, including the human resources that in fact will cover those levels of service. I think the second point that has to be recognized is the partnership, being South Niagara, will also hopefully secure us a seat on the RTO, which right now there's no RTO representation south of Highway 20, which is very disturbing. So the intent there is to have at least some representation on the Regional Tourism Association or organization. Bringing everyone together is our next step. We just most recently had a meeting with the mayors. The mayor of Welland didn't show up. He sent his regrets, but I'm hoping he'll be at the next meeting. At least a member of his council will be, and as well as the EDO. However, the Township of Wainfleet was represented, as well as the town of Fort Erie, and of course the City of Port Colborne. South Niagara, the intent is to bring forward all our assets as South Niagara, but it is not the intent to segregate South Niagara. It's simply to bring forward the assets of South Niagara, exploit those assets for the first time because they never have been in the past, and with that, bring with the rest of Niagara those assets so that the brand of Niagara is more full, is more satisfied. Because right now the brand is very limited. When you talk to people from outside of Niagara, yes, they recognize Niagara Falls, they recognize the wineries. When they come into Niagara, they then recognize the South Coast. And therefore, the branding of the South Coast to marry with the rest of Niagara, once again, is imminent. But we don't stop there. We also include sport tourism with the Niagara Sport Commission. We also recognize, obviously, the falls and the wineries, agritourism. Heritage is becoming very large, very big throughout the region. And of course, the most recent area of notoriety for the region of Niagara, City of Port Colborne included, is culture. The arts, as well as culinary culture, is becoming very big here in Niagara. So the intent is to partner, package, and then bring it all and infuse it or insert it into the overall Niagara brand, and then therefore we'll get a better bang for our buck versus working individually as 12 individual municipalities. So that's the intent. Our next step is, we did secure that meeting, by the way, in January with the mayors and the EDOs, and of course with that solidifying the organization and moving forward. Okay? Sorry for a long-winded answer, but that's the update, and I figured I'd get it all in one shot. Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Thompson. Most of the initiative of this project was driven by a particular staff, or was it driven by the department?
Mr. Thompson.
We were able to get the funding to bring an individual on board to be the project manager, if you will, within the organization. So it was one project that was assigned to one individual to stick handle, to lead in terms of moving it forward. So it definitely was a department initiative, but it was assigned to an individual.
Thank you. Councillor?
I agree with what everyone said. I mean, this is perfect. We're on the right track. We're going the right way. Can this initiative, this momentum be continued without that staff member? If the funding is not there anymore, what do we do? Can it continue? Can Mr. Thompson's department continue this without that particular staff member?
Mr. Howe?
Your Worship, along the short answer, with or without that individual, the fact is there needs to be a buy-in of the partners, and if there isn't a buy-in of the partners, then it's going to be a function of the City of Port Colborne. It needs to be a collaborative effort of all the municipalities and all the players on the south coast. If it was in place now, or if we didn't get it in place until 6 months from now, it's still going to take the same kind of resources. With or without this individual that we've got here right now on this job creation program, it doesn't matter. The fact is that somewhere down the road there's got to be some resources put into it, and the resources that will be required to make this function will have to be part of the partner's contribution, and that's not there yet. It's going to be January to find out what is everybody's contribution going to be, and that will dictate what the level of organization is going to be. In the organization, there is funding out there as a recreation, arts, and whatever you want to call it, through the RTO. And if it can develop, some of that funding or assistance may help. So it's going to be somewhat self-serving. We don't know that yet until all the partners come to the table and have a discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Doucette.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that essentially some of the momentum may be lost until we can get everybody together, or we can still continue it, but hopefully we can continue it as quickly as possible and get a hold of these partners. And
Mr. Howe.
Your Worship, we have an individual dedicated to that right now. In December, that finishes. Yes. That individual will not be here. If there is, after the January meeting, if there is an appetite to develop an organization much broader than just simply out of our Economic Development Department in Port Colborne, the resources necessary to develop that organization will be determined at that time. If we need somebody to do it, and to do that actually requires somebody, then we'll have to look at whatever resources where we can get it from. And that'll be a decision at that time. Right now, yes, there's an individual assigned to it. That individual's role with the city and the job creation program is finished in less than a month.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 20. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the correspondence received from Jonathan Taft, Wendy Barclay, and Quinn Taft, dated November 17th, 2011, request for 3 autistic child signs located on Neff and King Streets be referred to the Director of Engineering and Operations for a staff report.
Have a second to that, please. Councillor Danch, questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Have we installed these signs before anywhere in the city? And I guess the only reason I'm lifting this is if we don't have to get a staff report on the signs, do we have a template on, if there's a child with this anywhere else in the city where we've signed it before, can we do this without bringing a report back?
Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't, with this particular request, we haven't had that type of sign, but we have had deaf child signs and a similar type thing in various locations. Certainly the signs are manufactured. There's a standard template for them that we've looked at. The signs are approximately $60 a piece to purchase, and there'd be some installation costs, utility costs, utility locate costs for that. But other than that, these signs could, at the will of council, can be put up in an appropriate location.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ron. I just feel, you know, these people are obviously looking for some help in safeguarding their son. I'm just, you know, I don't know if we really need to have a report. Would you feel more comfortable with the report coming back, or would you be comfortable with direction of council to, I don't know if we need, if the 3 signs are necessary, maybe 2 would do, but obviously they're looking at safeguarding their child, and I mean, if we've made provision for other people with issues to sign around where they live, I just wonder what the feel around council is.
Thank you. Mr. Hanson?
Through Mr. Mayor, with the council's direction, we'd be happy to meet with the parents and find an appropriate location for these signs and have them installed, if that's the direction of council.
Councillor?
That's fine. I'd like to hear what the rest of council has to say, because I would support, the meeting with the parents.
Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like it if, Ron, if your department, when you're looking at this, you could check and see what impact these signs have had in other communities, because I read something just very recently that children have become targets as a result of having signs like this. I'd be really careful on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Members of Council, there's a recommendation before you. It asks for a report to come back from Council. Does members of Council have an appetite to actually add to that recommendation? Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, I guess, have council direction to have that meeting with the parents.
Okay, so
and I can understand your concerns. My parents have a sign, or there's 2 signs on the road they live in, and albeit they live in St. Catharines, I guess what they're looking for is for drivers, just to be aware of, of a youngster that may dart out across the road. I know that the individual by my parents' house, they've watched, and as the child has got out of the car when they've come home with mom and dad, they open the door and she runs down the driveway and runs out of control across the road. So it's more of a warning sign. I can understand your concerns. I think here we could do something for these people, and if we could have a meeting with them and find out where they want the signs and go from there.
So do I add that as an amendment? Do I have a second to that amendment, please? Councillor Butters. On the amendment, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried to the motion as amended. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Danch?
Just because this is right in my neighborhood, that is an apartment building, I believe. So, if this child is there, that's fine. But if they were to move away down the road, you would hope that these signs would be removed and, not just left as a sign that no one pays attention to anymore.
If we can mention that to the parents to inform the city if in fact they do move. Mr. Hanson?
We'd be willing to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Thank you, Councillor Danch. Further questions or comments to the amended motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members of council, and thank you, Councillor Elliott. We'll now move on to item 26. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas a growing proportion of our population is reaching the age of 65 plus, with many reaching 85 plus, and whereas 80% of people over the age of 65 are living with a chronic disease, 70% of those have more than one. These conditions do not require round-the-clock hospital care, and many seniors are able to lead active lives at home and are engaged in their community with the support of family or paid caregivers. And whereas senior-directed health care will shift from demands for acute care to more supportive seniors services that help them to manage chronic degenerative disorders and continue to be active participants in society. It is time for our public health care system to take proactive steps to address this coming reality. And whereas a substantial body of research has documented the cost effectiveness of home care, and there are numerous articles on how home care benefits senior well-being. And whereas supportive services, including cooking, shopping, laundry, and bathing, are the critical, cost-effective difference between active living and hospital care that costs families and the province. It is imperative that the provincial government recognize in-home support as an integral part of the health care mix and allocates appropriate funding and support for its delivery. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne resolves as follows: that the City of Port Colborne urges the Government of Ontario to create a new and stable funding plan for supportive home care, a scheme that is equitably funded and provides for universal services.
Thank you, Councillor Desmarais. I have a seconder to that, please. Councillor Butters. Are there any questions or comments to that? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you. This motion is actually coming out of the Seniors Advisory Committee, and they've worked long and hard at trying to improve conditions for seniors. And this motion would apply to not just seniors, but to all people in frail states of health.
Thank you, Councillor Desmarais. Any further questions or comments? I'd like to add just one more, if the mover wouldn't mind, and the seconder wouldn't mind. I'd like to add one more, just to put some meat to it, with respect to sending it off to AMO for their support. And yeah, I think AMO would do it. Okay, is that fine? Yes. The seconder is fine with that too? Who's the seconder? Councillor Butters? Okay. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Thank you, members. And that will do it for the items this evening. We'll now move on to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Doucette, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We'll now move on to the council meeting portion of our meeting. Members of council, Madam Clerk, any addendum items this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Bylaws arising out of items 7, 8, and 9 on your Committee of the Whole agenda. Specifically, bylaws listed on your agenda for council this evening as Bylaw 5723-15411, Bylaw 5724-15511, and Bylaw 5725-16511 have been withdrawn because the associated staff reports were either amended or deferred in committee, so the remaining bylaws have been renumbered to suit.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of council, I need a motion to confirm the agenda, please. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Danch, are there any questions or comments to that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Disclosures of interest, Councillor Kenny and Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Worship. Item number 3, as I am a member of the Committee of Adjustment.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. Councillor Elliott.
Item number 3 is I am a member of the Committee of Adjustment as well, and item number 4 as I represent the company referred to in the item.
Thank you. No further disclosures? With none, we do have the minutes of the 40th meeting regular of council that will need adoption, dated November 14th, 2011. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Bodner.
Items 3 and 4, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. The remainder of the items, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Kenny, Councillor Desmarais, questions or comments? All in, you guys are quick. All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Councillor Bodner, item 3 and 4.
Item 3, Mr. Mayor, that Department of Planning and Development Report number 2011-86, subject remuneration of Committee of Adjustment members, be approved, recommending, subject to council repealing bylaw 50-20-7507 through Planning and Development Report 2011-72, that council approve the bylaw attached hereto as Appendix A to establish remuneration of Committee of Adjustment members.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Have a seconder to that, please. Councillor Danch, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, at the Department of Planning and Development Report number 2011-83, subject Humberston Shoe Park surplus land, be approved, recommending the Council of the City of Port Colborne hereby declare part of Lot 5 and 6 on Plan 763, being Part 1 and 2 on Plan 59R-14504, as illustrated on the attached hereto, as surplus to the city's needs, and 2, that council engage the services of Royal LePage to sell the property.
Thank you, Councillor Bodner. Seconder, please. Councillor Doucette, questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to proclamations. We do have one proclamation this evening, and as always, I'll be looking for a mover and a seconder. Whereas the Niagara Centre for Independent Living and other independent living centres across the country are recognizing December 2nd as Independent Living Day here in Canada. And whereas the disability community in Canada exceeds 16% of our population. And whereas Independent Living Day recognizes the contributions of people with disabilities to Niagara communities as entrepreneurs, decision makers, employees and employers, musicians, artists, volunteers, parents, grandparents, and citizens. And whereas Independent Living Day calls the attention to the ability and willingness of people with disabilities to contribute to Canada's economic, political, and social communities. And whereas for many among us, our future depends on the success of the independent living movement and the efforts put forward by each and every one of these individuals. Now therefore, I, Mayor Vincent Badaway, proclaim December 2nd, 2011 as the Independent Living Day here in the city of Port Colborne, in recognition of the important work of the Independent Living Resources Centres and the members of the Independent Living Movement, and urge all citizens of our community to recognize the many contributions made to our community by persons with disabilities. The mover and seconder, please. Councillor Doucette, Councillor Kenny. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. We'll now move on to the minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. We have two sets, the minutes of the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting of September 7, 2011, and the minutes of the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of January 11th, 2011. Jeez. About time. Those minutes came. Who is the secretary to that committee? Janice? Oh, is that what it was? Okay, gotcha. The committee never had quorum, so that's the excuse. Okay, got it.
We're going to make some changes.
Anyways, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Demery, Councillor Kenny. Mover and seconder. I'm sorry, all in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. I just can't believe that. It's almost the year. That's funny. Members of council, notices of motion. With no notice of motion, we'll move on to the introduction of the bylaws. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the following bylaws be read a first, second, third time and finally passed. Bylaw 5717148111 being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 89-2000 being a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on city roads, Silver Bay Road. Bylaw 5718149111 being a bylaw to establish fees for various planning and development services and to repeal various bylaws. Bylaw 5719150011 being a bylaw to establish remuneration of Committee of Adjustment members. Bylaw 57201511 being a bylaw to declare part of lots 5 and 6 on Plan 763 being parts 1 and 2 on Plan 59R 14540 Humberston Shoe Park as surplus to the needs of the city. Bylaw 5721152211 being a bylaw to establish rates and fees for the Bylaw Enforcement Division for the year 2012. Bylaw 5722153111 being a bylaw to designate an area within the limits of the City of Port Colborne as a community improvement project area. Bylaw 5723154111, a bylaw to authorize the temporary boring of $2 million for the Health and Wellness Center. Bylaw 5724155111 being a bylaw to establish a schedule of rates and fees for Sugarloaf Marina. Bylaw 5725155611 being a bylaw to establish a schedule of rates and fees for public works services in 2012. Bylaw 5726155711 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with V. Gibbons Contracting regarding tender 2011-14 Elizabeth Street bulk water station installation and water service extension. Bylaw 5727155811 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Municipal Solutions regarding tender 2011-36, supply of one large bulk water filling station, and for the software component upgrade to the Elm Street bulk water filling station. And finally, bylaw 5728155911 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an addendum to the computer-aided fire dispatch agreement with the City of St. Catharines.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Well done. Have a mover and seconder, please. You okay over there, Kenny? You good? Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Madam Clerk, the confirmatory bylaw, please.
That the following bylaw be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, bylaw 572916011, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its special and regular meetings of Council, November 28, 2011.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Doucette. Questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Before I ask for a motion to go into closed session, members of council, just for those members of on Cogeco that are watching, we do have a budget meeting next Monday. Peter, 6:30 here? Budget, 5 o'clock here. Okay, so 5:30 open session. So here in the chamber next Monday, December 5th, beginning around 5:30, we're going to have our budget meeting, so you're more than welcome to come on out and take part in that. And then following that, our last committee and council meeting of the year will be held on Monday, December 12th, 2011. Committee of the Whole and Council once again here in the chamber, beginning at 6:30 p.m. I will now, pardon me? Yeah, less regularly scheduled. Thank you, Bob. I'll now ask for a motion to go into closed session. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Doucette. That council now proceed in camera in order to address the following matters. A, the minutes of the closed session portion of the November 14th, 2011 council meeting. And finally, confidential Chief Administrative Officer report, Human Resources Division, report number 2011-18. Subject, Professional Firefighters Collective Agreement pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392D, Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations. With that, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Have a wonderful week.